Okay, good morning, everybody. We're going to pick up on the bottom of Daf Kuf Daled Amud Beis. Mir Hashem, get to the Mishnah on Daf Kuf Yud Aleph Amud Beis. We're picking up by Boyer Rabbi Lazar, where we stopped off last week. Yitzia Ma'u Shetoyu Beporim Hanisrafim V'Seirim Hanisrafim. So Rabbi Lazar continues with the Shaila. Over here he has a Shaila L'Chayra. What would be the halacha if it left before this Rikas Damim? Would it become possible or not? Right away the Gemara questions, "My coming violate?" Rashi explains, what's the question? Harei Soifim Lotze, so why in the world should you think it should become possible? On that, Rav Yirmiyah Barabba, and he explains as follows. The whole Shaila is as follows. I'll leave the Mandama, Dain Lo Yagia is man and Lotzes. The Shaila is only the Mandama who holds. But in the scenario of Kachim Kalim, where left before is Rikas Damim, and it's not the Zman, do we say in such a Mandama, me, I'm reading Hani, me, I'll tell you Dafka the Basar, Dain Soifim Lotzes Chayva, that we can understand Dafka the Basar. By Kachim Kalim. Over here, Mashenkin over here, over Hani, the Soifim Lotzes Chayva Allah. I don't Machanami. Well, the Maisis before this Rika, so that's why Rabbi Lazar had a Shaila Lefi that Mandamar. And then we're going to bring it right, Toshma, the Tani Levi. What are we discussing? We're talking about the Param and Israfim, Usir and Israfim, that water that gets burnt by the Beis Hadashan. However, what happened was, She'ira by Psol B'Tziyasai. And we're understanding the Havmin is, my love, Psol Yitziyah. So the Chayr, it's a bomb, right? You see over there, then it's such a halacha that it had a Psol. And over there with understanding, there is the concept of Psol Yitziyah. And the Gemara's Deichel says, no. Over here, what we're discussing, Loi, rather it's the Psol Tumah, or Psolina, like we saw earlier. Last week we had a very similar teretz of Psol Tumah and Psol Yitziyah. Here it's the Psol Tumah and the Psol Lina. Again, we continue with Rabbi Lazar, Sha'ila, Rabbi Lazar. Parim and Israfim, V'Seirim and Israfim, Shiyotze Rubai. Now the halacha is that Roiv of the animal, Taka left the Beis Hamikdash. However, B'miyot Aver. But if you look at the Roiv, it's very fascinating. Do we look at the Aver? And therefore it's only a meat, or we look at the animal, and the animal's Roiv left. So again, Roiv of the Aver is inside. So what is the halacha mouth? Do we say Hach miyut the Aver, Basa Ruba Shadina Le, we go Basa Roiv of the Aver. And therefore what? Roiv of the Aver is inside. V'alai nafkalei. I'll tell you Basa Ruba the Behema Shadinon, we go Basa Roiv the Behema. That's, let's be real. The Roiv of the Behema is outside. On that the Gemara says, Pshita, the Leishevkina Ruba the Behema, Vazlina Basa Ruba the Avar. There's no havmina to say that you should go basar, roiv and aver, since lamaisa roiv the animal about this yaitze. There's no shaila that it's considered a yitzia. So what would be the shaila? Elo shiyotze chetzia. It's taka smack in half. So where would the shaila be suddenly? Beroiv aver. However, if you go basar the aver, where's the roiv aver? It's taka half and half. But do you look at the aver not in such a case? Hi, miuta the aver basar roiv aver shadina leiv anofakle. And again, so you have half the body inside, half the outside, but Roiv with the Aver's outside. Oh, you are on the topic of Hayam and Aleph, Idilma, Basar, Behema, Shadinale, we go, Basar, the animal. And let's be real, the animal, we can't say there's Roiv outside, and that we're going to apply with a take. Ravo Barav Huna, Masnula, he explained the question, Begavri. We're talking about the Shaila of Roiv, it's not about the Behema. Rather, it's about the people carrying it. B'misaskim b'chamisha b'nei Adam. So you have 5 people schlepping the animal. The nafku tlasa. However, partial a tray. There's still 2 people inside. Do we say basa roiv mis askin as lean, and therefore it's 3 considered yitziyah? I basa behema as lean on, and the behema we all agree the behema is not considered outside. Therefore, we're going to apply with a take. Boy, Rabbi Lazar, param and iseirim and israfim shiyatzu v'chazru mao. So the hamin is what we're discussing. Rashi explains the hamin is we're talking about the tumas begadim. And therefore what happened was they left. We all know there's halacha that it's metamid the begadim. So the shaila is it went back. So what would be the shaila? Mao. I'm reading, do we say kivan then nafkaluhu? Itamaluhu. The second, you left the Beis Hamikdash, we said there's a trigger. And what's the trigger? The trigger is considered a yitziyah for tumah. Aidilma, kivan the hadar. And so Rashi, it's like it never went back. It's almost like we have a button we call the reset button. Like you press it again, it's back to square one. So Amar Abba Mamo Tashma. Let's bring a raya. See how these people schlepping them with poles. What did we say earlier? This is the top of the Mishnah Kuf Daled Amud Beis. Harishayim yatzu chutz l'chaymes hazara. V'achrayim lo yatzu rishayim yatzu chutz l'chaymes hazara. Metam begadim. V'achrayim What does it say? If you're going to tell me this concept, that once you left the trigger is already there, even in such a case where the nevela came back, it should also become a tami. Why is it not tami? It's a bomb raya that we consider, yes, it's such a concept that we can start over. Is this a raya? The whole nekuda where we come out this whole halacha is, in order to say yechayev and you become tamei, is the concept that you have to leave the machana. What would be the shaila? You're right. The shaila is kigoin to nakita law bebalkaisi. Balkaisi, Rashi says he brings down from the Yerushalmi. It's a maka, like a staff, like a stick. I'm picturing it more like a fishing hook, more of like something that you grab and schlep. That's easier to understand. Zok the Halak Gemara Tana Rabbanan. Parim upara usarir hamishtalech. What is the halacha? Hamishtalech. And the sarfa, the people are sending out to the azazel, and the person involved in the burning it. The halacha is mitame begadim. This is the Torah. Torah tells us to become tamei. However, the nevela itself, the hein atzma, the animal itself, the carcass itself, ain't mitame begadim. However, Zokter Meir avu mitamin oichlin umashkin divrei Meir. That is shitas Meir. However, chachamim oimrim, no, he says as follows, because it's going to be mechalik very fast, and it comes out the soy mishtalech, even though it's a chai, we're telling us it becomes tamei. However, that all handle. However, Saram Shtalech cannot be Metame and Metame Shuchai. We never find such a concept that a Chai is Metame Vachai, Eino Metame Oichlun Umashkin. So Ad Kan Chitas or Meir, Machlekes or Meir Chacham in such a case. Zoktim Arbish learn Meir, that we understand he's not Mechalik. He puts Saram Shtalech inside. Who's he going like? The Tana the Rebbe Shmuel. The Tana the Rebbe Shmuel, what was this Tana? He says as follows. It says in the Pasuk, I'll call Zera Zerua. This is the pasuk that talks about the chipol min v'las. We're talking about tumah. The next pasuk says really you need hechsher. We all know the concept of hechsher tumah, the zayin mashkin, and it says I'll call Zera Zerua. It lands on the seed Ashizar. Tahor who? Why? Because there's no hechsher. Mazra in she'ein soifin l'tamah tumah chamura. There's no such a concept of a zera, of a seed to what? To become an avatoma, which what is an avatoma? Mitama adam kelim utzrichin hechsher. That's the next pasuk. Afkol shein soifin l'tamah tumah chamura tzrichin hechsher. However, if there is a concept that eventually could be mitama, yatzisa nevelas oif tahor shesoif l'tamah. Anything that is eventually going to lead to tumah, that they had such a concept. That what should soif l'tamah tumah chamura they ain't tzrichin hechsher. So then we can understand the Rebbe Shmuel. That's what Shittas Rameh is going like the Rebbe Shmuel. El Rabbanon Zaktik Varam. Islu the Tana the Rebbe Shmuel. If he taka holds like the Tana the Rebbe Shmuel, if he salam shtalech manavshach. How do you understand that you want to be mechalik when the kufayim and aleph towards the bottom of it? How do you understand that you want to be mechalik the salam shtalech and Shittas Chachamim and Shittas Chachamim? Manavshach. If you hold the concept of Tana the Rebbe Shmuel, then afilu salam shtalech, and he less afilu salam shtalech, and he less if you don't hold this afilu parim uparim minalon. Where would you have this type of concept? On that Zaktik Mara, Kiyasar Abdima Amar, Ami B'Marava, the Taka said in the West, in Eretz Yisrael, Tzrichin Hechsher Tumah Makam Acher. The Hechsher Tumah, what we're saying is, Einachanami. You Taka need a Hechsher from what? It could be from a Sheretz. Taka does not need to be, if anything, it doesn't need to be the Hechsher, when we're saying Kol Shein Soifel Tama Tumah Chamura, it could mean, Zok Rashi, for example, Shiga B'Sheretz, or B'Nevela. However, something that eventually will hit the Tumah Chamura, that could be Matame, for which is which case? The Parah Parim. Mamash Sugya. However, we're saying that you don't need a Tumah Makamach. But Rabbi Lazar, Parim Useiru and Israfim Maushi Tamu, Eichlun Umashkin Bifnim Kebechutz. What's the Shail? Do we say Mechutz Yitzir Kemechutz Amaisa Dami Yalait? So we always have the concept that you need to have a Chashiv Kamaisa. It really has to do with the Maisa Chashivas. And the Maisa Chashivas, if you don't have the Maisa Chashivas, it's causing that you can't have this effect. So Zaktik Mar, you have the case of here by Parim Useiru and Israfim, and you want it to be that the Shail is it's Mechutz Yitzir. The question becomes, do we look at it as a Chashiv Kamaisa? It's a Mechutz Amaisa. Do we say Basa the Bayah the Pasha Mechutz Yitzir? Tako Kemechutzer Meiser, Dami, and Yitaka Bes in the Chashiv Meiser. Nevelas Oif Tahar. So a person has Nevelas Oif Tahar. What is the halacha Meir Mao? Sheyitame, what? Bekazayis. According to our Meir, this is the Shaila. According to our Meir, should be Metame. Oichlin Umashim Bekazayis, but Avada. there's no shayla for your Rabbanon. If you're Rabbanon, we don't have such a shayla. However, because according to Rabbanon, we all know, Bechlal, the whole Havminim, Bechlal, the whole Tumah is Tumah Beis Abliya by the Iftar. So what is the halacha? Mao she tamid bechazayis. So Zok the Gemara as follows. The machzela aro loiti boilach. Everyone agrees that when it's sitting on the ground, there's no shayla, that what? That it doesn't come tameh. Why? Because it's mechusar the maisa. The naket bepume, when it's in your mouth, is not missing a maisa. Loiti boilach. The havad it's metama. So where in the world do you have a shayla lefir mer? Kiti boilach the naket lebiyade. When you're holding it in your hand, you're about to eat it. Do we look at mechusar kreva kemechusar maisa dami alai? How do you look at someone who's about to, you see literally a still picture and he's holding it in the middle? What is that? Mechusar maisa or not? That what? Maisa? That mechusar kreva? Mechusar maisa dami. While on the topic of ham and base, it's not mechusar maisa. And therefore what? Therefore avada we're going to say it's taka mitana. Eisvei, Frektik Mora, that we just said earlier that according to a mayor, what's the whole halacha? Even a kazayas. Now we're going to show us that the brayso that's not so simple. The hilchos toma. We're going to have actually the shear of a kabeya. Shleisha sedvarim nemru ben avela seiftar v'zeh echamem. What is the one of them? Machshava ve'ein tzrichin hechsher. The halacha is in order. What are we discussing? We're discussing that a person wants to be mitztarif, a less than a kazayas to be mashlim abeya. The question is, he wanted to be mitam amaga. So he says as follows: it needs to have machshava. You need to have intent to be mitztarif it. However, the Lashon Rashi is ve'einav, ve'ein tzrichin hechsher. You don't need a hechsher of hechsher. We all know means the zayim ashken to be matamet. Why? The nekuda is like we just said earlier. Hoyol v'soifel etamet tumah chamura. So it's not a problem. Umetama tumas eichlin. What's the question? It says over here bekabeya. Clearly says kabetza. My lav rameir. So l'chayr, how could you in the world say there may holds a shir kazayis? Here we clearly see if it's right kabeya, and that the Gemara says no. Loy rabbanani. It's takashitas rabbanan, and rabbanan avad is the shir kabetza. We're not arguing on that. Zok demar vaktani reisha tzricha machshava ve'ein tzrichin hechsher. Who's the one who says this? Uman shamas la'isvar rameir. Zok demar med the reisha rameir seif anami rameir. And that the Gemara is daiche me the area ha kedisa and echanami the reisha kabir rameir v'ha kedisa. Zok demar v'amaktani seifa where it says chitasa umilikasa. We learned this sugya. The malika could help, even though a person does a shechita malika outside the base of mikdash or shechita inside the base of mikdash. It helps that it doesn't turn into an avela. Then what? Man shabbos lahesvar. When we learned this, it's rameir. So it comes out reisha b'seifa rameir. Very very daichik, and that thing where answers in yes. We find this many times. Reisha b'seifa rameir mitziyas rabbanan. So you have to know again exactly how Gemaras operate. That sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes it says because of that to yufta, or it gives on a new teretz. Do not sit down. I want you to stand until you can explain to me how milsa. Then what? Nevelas oif tahar l'rameir. So we're discussing over here again the nevelas oif toif l'rameir. And according to Rameir, what is shitas Rameir? Even a kazayis. We learned about it according to Rabbanan, shitas Rabbanan. The tumah is going to be a kabetza. However, what's the shayla? The shayla is regarding tumah. Do we say as follows? Mainin law rishon v'sheni. Ain't mainin rishon v'sheni. How do we look at it? Do we look at avatuma? We all know the halach of avatuma could turn chelik aleph into rishon, and then the rishon could go and do into sheni, or maybe only has the power of a rishon and it's give it a sheni. Amalei as follows: Kol heicha de metama adam b'maga. If it's metama, if we're talking about metama, a person b'maga mainin by rishon v'sheni. However, kol heicha de ain't metama adam b'maga ain't mainin by rishon v'sheni. And over here, we all know how could it be matama? It's only matama with what? They bliya. So we clearly, it's not matama rishon sheni. So boy min avzei Rav Ami bar Chia. Ami lost someone to say to Rav Avin Rav Kana hadet not chiburei oichlin ayedei mashkin. And do we say chibur tumah lakala? Vein chibur tumah chamura. Mining by rishon v'sheni. Very similar shayla. I ain't mining by rishon v'sheni. Amaleni gave the same answer. Kol heicha the matama adam mining by rishon v'sheni. And kolecha, and when it's not mitami adam, and mail over here we understand by chibur eichlin that it's not mitami adam, ein minim by rishon b'sheni. Yatsu elu ve'elu. Zok the Heilige Gemara. What is the halacha when they both left? Zok the Mishnah yatsu elu ve'elu. We saw in the Mishnah. The Mishnah tells us, Yatsu Elu ve'elu mitamim gadim. However, Shimon Aime ain't metamin until when? At Yutzasar Beruban, Nitach Abasar, ain't Hasayrif metamin God. Zok the Hilig Gemara. Not immediately. How do we know that we're saying in such a case that you're become tummy? What are we discussing over here? We're discussing over here by the halon hu aimer chutz legimel machlis. This is talking about the para that it says over there. We're discussing again. We have over here the para of Yom Kippurim and the regular part that says la halon hu aimer chutz legimel machlis, that it's nisra v'kam by the power of Yom Kippurim. What does it say? La machnachas. Loi melach to tell us kiven shiyatz chutz la machnachas. The halach is it's metame God. Zok tomorrow v'hi gufa. How do we know b'chlal the power of Kohen Gadol? Mino. The Tana Rabbana says in the pasuk v'hoitzi is kol par mechutz lamachne. Clearly tells us in the pasuk that you have to remove a chutz lamachne. What does that mean? It means chutz legimel machnes. Ata oimer chutz legimel machnes. Maybe ben elamachachnas. Oh, ein elamachachas. Kishoim paraheda. However, what does it say about paraheda mechutz lamachne? She'ein tzarich loimed. You don't have to say this. Why? Sharei kvar nema already says this. Kasher saraf. Esapar harishan litaloi machne shniya. And again, we have another pasuk showing b'chutz lamachne medashen, which you don't need to say this. Ain't tzarich loimer sharei kvar nema. It says it clearly in the pasuk. Al shevach hadashin isarif to tell us litaloi machne shlishi. So again, so what do we have over here? We have two powers. We have the power of the Kohen Gadol. This is the first pasuk where it says chutz legimel machnes by the power of Kohen Gadol, and we have by the power of Yom Kippurim. So we're bringing from there. We clearly see that once it leaves the machne, it's matam begodim. And then we saw this whole brayso. How do we know b'chlal? By the power of the Kohen Gadol, it's matam. And we saw this from all these psukim, the ain't tzarich loimer, and that come to tell us they needed chutz legimel machnes. Zok tomorrow, Reb Shimon, you Reb Shimon now in that holes in our Mishnah. The parim is only matam when you touch it. Elamai doesn't hold this concept of mechutz lamachne. Reb Shimon, hi mechutz lamachne. Then what's he going to do with this? Ma'avalei, what's he going to do with this? Pasuk zok tomorrow, mivoyle lichatanya. The Rebbe Lazar, it says over here, chutz lamachne. This is the power of Yom Kippur. V'nemar kan chutz lamachne. V'nemar lahalon. Lahalon is by the para aduma. Clearly says v'hoitzi oisel chutz lamachne. And ma lahalon by the para aduma. Chutz legimel machne. So to have kan by the Yom Kippurim chutz legimel machne. Zok tomorrow ma lahalon. Over there, the Mizracha Yerushalayim by the para aduma. That's talking about Mizracha Yerushalayim. Again, it's coming from the Psukim. Af kan so to over here by the part of Yom Kippurim Mizracha Yerushalayim. On the topic of Vav and Aleph. El Rabbanon. However, according to Shittas Rabbanon, which direction are you going to attack? I'm going to burn it. Heichisar fluzak the mark of the Tanya. We have a brayso that says Heichan Israfin. We're talking about the power of the Sar. Where do you burn it? Let's soften Yerushalayim. You attack it, burn it in the north. Like every type of chatas, you burn it in the north. Let's soften Yerushalayim chutz. L'shalosh machnes. However, where is it burnt? A base hadeshen nisrafin. It needs to be by the base hadeshen where it was ready. A base hadeshen. However, it's mechlal. Rashi's medaik. The Tanakam. It doesn't need a base hadeshen. So I'm a Rava man Tana the Palagala the Reis Glili. So Rebbe Lazar ben Yaakov the Tanya says in the pasuk Al Shavach Hadashi Sarif the watch Sheyeh Sham Deshen Sheyakul Sham Deshen. However, Rebbe Lazar ben Yaakov I know Shem Koy Moy Meshufach. So I'm a Abai tells Rava no. That they both agree to the concept where it needs to be. However, the machlekes is doesn't need to be a makam meshupach or not. And that Rebbe Lazar Avada will agree to what the point he's trying to bring out. Rebbe Lazar Yaakov agrees to the concept that it needs to be taka already in a place. She yakdim sham the ready was the dash. Tana Abana Hasoyrif is metam v'godim. However, v'loya makes this as art. After the person who's burning it, the Torah is telling us that a person's metam v'godim. However, the person that's lighting it is busy with the fire is not metame begodim. Another one is v'loy mesadas amaracha. He's not either the metame the begodim. Ve'izah soyrif. What is a person soyrif? It's a mesayeya b'shas reifa yochol af mishenasu efer. It should be metame begodim. Tamalayma says in the pasuk oisam metame begodim. However, once to become efer mishenas and efer a metame begodim. And Reb Shimon Omer oisam is metame begodim, but nitach habasar. Once it becomes a little charred, it's not going to be metam. It might be nice. What is taka the nafkamina? Amarava ikibinai the shavich in a scenario where it's what? It's nitach habasar, where it gets very charred. So the nakuda is avad. You could look at it as afer. According to Tanakam, will be metama. Because why? It's not afer, and it says in the pasuk oisam. However, Rebbe Lazar Reb Shimon, you would have rather say it's not metam begodim hadron aloch full yoim hadron aloch. Okay, we're going to start a brand new parak, which is discussing by Riches. This parak is going to discuss is basically Vayikra Cha'am, if you don't mind to bring me a chumash on the way back, it says that this is a whole psukim of Vayikra Parak Yud Zayin through the psukim of Aleph through all the way through Tes, where the psukim on a simple level discuss the halachos of shchitas and akrava b'chutz. And it says as follows through Aleph through Zayin, talks about all the halachos of shchita b'chutz and akrava b'chutz. Oh, yeshikoyach. So we clearly have the psukim as follows. Through psukim Vayikra Yud Zayin. It says in Psukim of the Yikri Zayin, it's in Parshas Achri Mois and Be'ervi, where it talks about the Yidab Hashem and Moshe Leimer, and all the Psukim in the beginning, which we're going to quote over and over, we're going to discuss very big machlaikisim, ish, all the Psukim, but on a simple level, it talks about Shechita. The halacha is it's usher to be Sheichet B'chutz, and then it's going to discuss the last two Psukim of Hakrava B'chutz. So let's see it inside. Eventually we're going to see throughout the next blood there, we're going to see all the psukim, how it correlates, and we're going to be medayik from pasuk to pasuk. I think already last week we went through Nadav Avihu quite intense and well. So let's jump right into the parak. Hashoichet v'hamala b'chutz. So the nakuda is, a person did shchita, and he also did akrava. Where did he did it? He did it b'chutz. The halacha is, according to Shitas Tanakamo, chayv al shchita, v'chayv al Allah, you chayv for the shchita, and you chayv also for the akrava. However, Rabbi Yosef Glili Omer, it depends. Shachat b'fnim v'hela b'chutz. If you did the shechita inside, okay, and then I can understand you chayv. But shachat b'chutz, which we're going to discuss, shita Rabbi Yosef Glili. But if you did the shechita b'chutz v'hela b'chutz, potter. Why? Shaloi hela ela dav apostle, because you're already outside. And if it's outside, it's a dav apostle. Amr loy, and that chacham and tell him, I don't understand you basically. You're trying to tell me whenever it leaves, the halacha is that it's possible. Every single case, even the scenario where you did the shechita b'fnim, the second you left outside, u'mal b'chutz, given shetziyah psula. That was Tainat Chachamim. Yetz Hashem, we're going to see in the Gemara. Wasn't Rabbi Glili who defended himself. We're going to see Rabbi. We're going to go through it. And Yetz Hashem in the Gemara, how Rabbi Yosef Glili is going to answer back this Tainat. Then we had another case. Hatame sha'achal. The person's tummy, we already discussed this many times. If a person's tummy, he cannot eat. Bein kodesh tummy. Bein kodesh tar, according to Tanakama, it doesn't make a difference whether the kachim is tummy or not. The reality is, you're tummy, you're still chayv. We're going to discuss this. It's a chalisser, it's a koidel, we'll get there. However, the halacha is, bein kodesh tummy and kodesh tar chayv. Rabbi Yosef Glili, no. Tummy sha'achal tar chayv. V'tamei sha'achal tummy, depends. If I'm a tummy, and how could there be enes achal? It's therefore I'm potter. Shaloi achal el davatami. Amr loi. On that, chacham and tell back. I don't understand. Every time you want to eat something, av tamei sha'achal esatar. How does it work? Kiven shenagabai. The second you touch it, tameu. However, Taisus does throw in, you could have a scenario. You did it like Esav. You took the entals right down the throat. Taisus says, Avada, we don't want to say a case which is not Urchayu. It's not the Oirach. We're discussing Stam the Mosa Mikri, a regular case. Avada, the Chacham are trying to bring out the point. Every simple case, every time you touch it, L'chayra, you become apostle. Again, we're going to discuss this in the Gemara, very Geshmak. It's a koil how it will step. The final case says, V'tar sha'achal tamei, Potter, why she'en chayiv ela al tumas aguf. So let's jump right into the Mishnah, right into the Gemara. Bishlama hella, we can understand that krava. We're going to discuss Einish and Azar. Ksiv Einish, Ksiv Azar. How do we know this? Einish, Ksiv, like it says in the pasuk. Very clearly, what's it say in the pasuk? Vel Pesach. This is the end. This is the pasuk of krava. There's a pasuk Ches and Tes, where it says in the pasuk of Vel Pesach al Mayid Lo Yavienu. So if you look inside the pasuk of pasuk Ches, this is pasuk Tes. It says Vel Pesach al Mayid Lo Yavienu L'Aseh Seisel Hashem, and it clearly says V'nichras Aishahu Ma'amav. He clearly is going to get Pa'akaris. So we know what his punishment is. Hazara. The chsev, like it says in the pasuk, he shamer lecha pentalo lesecha. What's it mean? He shamer lecha. V'chad ha'arav avin ha'relazak ha'makom shenama he shamer. Either the words he shamer or the words pen or less va'al ein alois to say. So you have both. However, for tomorrow, l'shchita bishma einish, we can understand the chsev again. We also have the pasuk. We agree to this pasuk earlier, pasuk Gimel Dalet, where it says al Pesach ha'mayid, where you chayiv kars, where it says al Pesach ha'mayid layaviu el hazara min Allah. And where do you have the hazara? Amakra says the pasuk v'lo yizbechu oid. It says in the pasuk v'lo yizbechu oid Anything to do with what? We're trying to bring out the point. Anything to do with shchita. So tomorrow, we discussed in Sanhedrin where the Avodah Zorah is throwing rocks on it. So how do you know if you do a shchita you chayiv? Even though he didn't do it the direct, so so what in the world are you telling me that we're using this pasuk for that? We had this for the already needed to use this for the Gemara in Sanhedrin. So so we have two psukim to tell us both. So we still needed this pasuk for the price. It says, what are we talking about? We're talking about ready the Mishkan was standing. We're on the topic of Vavam and base. It says in the pasuk, the pasuk is talking about the shchita. Pasuk, tell pasuk on a simple level, if we keep going back to this, psukim aleph, whatever, psukim gimel really starts, but the point is, aleph through Zion discuss the shchita b'chutz, and the last two psukim discuss hakrava b'chutz. So Zok Demara, Shari Einchin Amr, this is talking about pasuk Dalet, which is talking about shchita. It says Vel Pesach Mayit and Azar the Chsiv, like we just learned. Tisha Melcha Bentala Lesecha. Mikan ve'ilach Bizvachim Shekdishon. What did we discuss with Mikan ve'ilach? Bizvachim Shekdishon B'shas Heta B'Mois Vehekrivan when B'shas Ifser HaB'Mois. What's to say? Shenam, like it says in the pasuk, Lemana Sheyaviu B'nei Yisrael Zevchem Hashem Zoichem. To tell us Zvachim Shtat Chakvar Al Pnei Asad. That's considered Laim Lecha Hasevech B'shas Ifser HaB'Mois Malal Levkosov Ki Leikro Pnei Asad. And the pasuk ve'viom la Hashem al Pesach Hamayim. This is pasuk Hey. Zumitzah say, but Loisa say me nine. Tamalayim it says in the pasuk v'leiz b'choit Yochoyei Oynish Kars. Tamalayim it says Chukas Oylav Tia Zoyslem l'Dersem Zoyslem v'loy Acharslem. But what's the point? We're mentioning this lengthy brisa. The point is we're clearly learning from the brisa. V'loy Yizbuchu comes to tell us that it's also to what to be makriv b'chutz when b'shas heter abamis. Therefore, the pasuk to Hamri b'shas isser habamis. So back to square one. Where do we know b'shas isser habamis? Hello, Meravin. We're learning this from a Kavachaymer. Uma b'makom shelo. Where's this? By the heter habamis. Still hizir makom shanash. But the isser habamis ain't it. Then shizir. I'm leaving a Rashi im Kain. He says, if you tell me this concept of Kavachaymer, why do we have the world? Why in the world do you need to have a lab Kavachaymer? The taste of Kavachaymer and Avela. That what? Man Avela Shaloyana Shizer. Chelo Shana Shana Din Shizer. Elamad, what do we see? You can't learn a lab from what? The Kavachaymer. So also commit the Rav Amalei and Chanam and Avela Nami Loyasa. Rav wants to say, Bechlal, you can't Bechlal learn out from an Avela. He's saying it's not a good riot. The Ikla Mifrach. Mal and Avela, we all know, Shen Chem Metame. Bechelev, it's not Metame. You're going to learn out very Mishrat. He keeps on trying to bring the Nekudas and try to be Daichit. You're going to tell him Mishrat's in Tameh? Mal Mishrat's in Tameh. We all know it's Metame V'mashu. Even the halach is even if you eat a Kadasha. Mishrat's in Tahirim. Mal Mishrat's in Tahirim, Shisurim B'mashu. Ma'arla. Sorry, there over there it's like Achila Kadasha. And there's Metame. Even Rashi says, even it's Vardan and Amala, which is something so small. Mishrat's in Tahirim is Achila Kadasha. Me'arla, you're going to tell me Ma'arla V'kila Akera? We all know Shvius continues his damaf. We never have it that it's bechlal ever going to be kosher. We could find b'chelev it is hut mechlala. Mikulu nam you can't even make it tzad shavah shekain loyhutru mechlala. However, chelev again we have the nekuda chelev could have taka chelev chaya could be kosher. Ravi kasha kasha. This is what would I have shver. Hard the tanan. Pasach umila. It's a mitzvah to say. The question is, taste of kavachayim from nicer, meiser, meiser. We all know nicer. Shaloyanash, and you don't get cars. Hizir Pasach umila. We clearly know the punishment shanash. Ein adin shehizir. So the we see from very clearly. You can't learn again. Can't learn at a klal. Can't learn at a lav for kavachayim. Amar Rashi mitzvah shmeitz committed kind of Amali. No. You can't learn out from Noisi. It's not a question. Why? The Ikala Mifrach, Mala Meiser, Shekain, Ein Le Takana, Time of Pesach, we all know. This is the whole concept Pesach Sheni that has Eshel Takana. So the Gemara, V'chimazir Menadin. This whole concept is what? Oh, we could be Mazim Menadin. Let's take a step back. This is again, Rashi brings out the whole sugya and Mesechtes Makos. How do we know the whole concept of Mazir Menadin is a chaysoi? Man the half sister, Kol Shekain full sister, Zok the Gemara over there, even the man the Amma, you could learn out Einshim and Adin because he learns that Chaysa is Taka Nam Yusur for something else. He agrees, Ein Mazim and Adin. That's on a simple level. It's not the Daf Yomi, we're not going to go through that whole Masechtas Makkos, but on a simple level, a Chaysa, we all know it over there, the Machlaikis, that even the man the Amma, Einshim and Adin, agrees, Ein Mazim and Adin. We're going to go into we're not going to come into Kavachim. Rather, what we're going to do is we're going to make Zer Shavas. It says Hava'a by Shchita, and it says Hava'a by Kreva. It doesn't use the Lashon of Va'a. If you look inside the Psukim, it says Evi'oi, and it says Yevi'anu. Yevi'anu by Kreva, and Evi'oi by Shchita. And Mala Halon, by Kreva, we all agree explicitly, Loyana Shel Enkin Hizir, like we said earlier, so to by Shchita, Afkar by the Shchita. Loyana Shel Enkin Hizir, and Enechanami, Ein Mazir, Menadin. We're not learning out from a Kavachim, rather, Xer Shava. Rava wants to say, Amak Kedar B'yaino. Dam Rabbi Yaina, we're on the top of Kuv Zayin, Omen Aleph. What does Rabbi Yaina say? Asya, over there, the Shabbos is a little different. It says in the Pasuk, by the Akrava, this is Pasuk Dvarim Yud Beis, Yud Dalet. What does it say in the Pasuk? When I read it inside the Torah, it says, Kiba Makam Hashiyivchar, Hashem, Be'achet Shvatecha Sham Talet. So the first Sham is clearly Hakrava L'Secha, V'Sham Tasa. What's the second Sham? When it says Sham Tasa, it's talking about Avodah. What is the avodas? You could have shchita, you could have zrika, and all these different types of avodas. So sham, mala, halon, by the krav loyana shalom kain hizer. So to have kam, the sham of tasa, which is the avodas, loyana shalom kain hizer. Very geschmack. Zok Gemara, ashkechon mukterei fnim shehelam b'chutz. So then we understand from the psukim, Rashi's masber, shchutim b'fnim, that it was ein de laktirim b'fnim, and then you took it outside. We understand yechayiv, like it says in the psukim that we just learned. Then what is discussing? It's discussing something was roi to be mifnim. However, you took it outside. So this is the psukim in Ravin and Parashas Achrim. So very geschmack. So we find this whole concept of what? Mukterei fnim, you took it outside. Zok Gemara, but mukterei chutz, she'elam b'chutz minayin. How do you know in a scenario, for example, shchut chutz, that was supposed to be ayim outside and not even inside? How do you know you're chayiv? It says in the pasuk va'aleim toimar. This is talking about the beginning of Parshas Allah, and when it says in the pasuk va'aleim toimar ishish, this is the pasuk of ready pasuk ches, where it starts discussing akrava, and we're learning the pasuk with the aleph va'aleim toimar alasmuchin toimar. Learn it, almost very interesting. We learn it like an ayin, where it's going upon them. It's going on the halachas that we just learned earlier. Where it discussed shchut. Continue with that concept. Right away, Maskeva Rava, Miksiv Alein, you know how to read it. It says it with an, it doesn't say with an ayin. That's the whole concept of diktuk. Depends how you learn it. With an ayin, with an aleph, it's two separate meanings. It would say with an ayin. Aleim, time not with that. It doesn't have the ayin. Va'aleim ksiv. Va'aleim ksiv, tzaloshin, tzatak, that's the kasha. Look at the Tana of the Be'er B'Shmal. Va'aleim taimar, we're coming from the what? We're coming from the vav. We all know this. Vav Moisef, Alein in Rishon, La'arv Parshias, to tell us even shchut b'chutz, she'elam b'chutz. We're learning the vav from Haktar B'fnim. Rabbi Yechon Amar Asya, he's coming from different psukim, he's coming from different Xer Shava. Again, it says a vi by the shchita, and it says a vi yeviano, like we saw earlier by that krav. Rabbi Yechon Amar Asya havava ma'alalam the shchita mukterei chutz. Afkan by the krav is mukterei chutz. Maskul Rabbi Ivi Hadetanan. When you learn the Mishnah increases, it clearly goes through all the halachas and how many chayv says 36. Fractive BB, Hadathan Shalosh Shesh, Krisa B'Tayr, Tlas V'Shesh Havi, and comes out, we have another one, Mukter B'Fnim, and Mukter B'Chutz. Zoktamar, the Ikam Mala, there's B'Fnim. The Ikam Mala, there's two cases, one Shchud B'Fnim, and one Shchud B'Chutz. And that, again, Rashi goes through that we do find out that even B'Shabbos, when it talks about the creases, it doesn't say all Lamates Malachas. Rashi says, because we find throughout Shas where it explains it explicitly in the Mishnayos. Here, we don't have such a concept. There's nowhere, Laitana be'hed yazok Rashi, that a mali var b'fnim, va'mali var b'chutz. So what are you talking to do? Taka the Gemara is going to blind with a kasha. Jump to the Heilig Gemara, v'ad Tanan. We learned this in the Mishnah, we're going to discuss this, Mitzvah Shem in a few minutes, Daf Kufyud Amar Aleph. It says, Hazoyrik, Mixas dom and bechutz. The halach is if you do a little, you didn't do them arba matanis. You only did one application, one matana. Chayv. So we know it. How do we know it's considered as rika? Zok the Gemara. Nafkulei midatanya says in the pasuk dam yechashiv. When it says in the pasuk dam yechashiv, what's it coming to be? Marba the rabbi says Zok divrei b'shmal. So again, we're going to see Machlekes, Rabbi Shmuel, and Rabbi Kiva. We're trying to figure out how do you know mixas dom mechutz is chayiv. So either we have Shitas Rabbi Shmuel, which is coming from the pasuk Dam Yichashiv, and Rabbi Kiva Omer, it says in the pasuk Oy Zavach. When it says by Allah, Oy, it's the rabbis es hazark. So we have to remember this very well, Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel, because we're going to keep on going back. What is Rabbi Kiva going to do with the psukim, the other psukim? What's Rabbi Shmuel going to do with the psukim? Whenever we have two different Tanoim, different Amoraim, learning from the psukim, we have to know the back and forth what each one will say about the other. So Zok the Gemara, Rabbi Kiva, Oy Zavach the rabbis hazark. Zok the Shmuel, Zok the Gemara, it's okay. So you, Rabbi Shmuel, you're learning Dam Yichashiv, then what are you going to do with Rabbi Kiva's pasuk? Rabbi Shmuel, Hayo Zevach Mayabed Lei. My answer is l'chalik. We find what's to be l'chalik. You don't think you need Zok Rashi, an Ayla, and a Shlomim. It's good enough one of them. Where did Rabbi Kiva know that you don't need Ayla or Shlomim? Rabbi Kiva l'chalik Manoli. Nafkalei. He's coming from the pasuk. It says, what's the pasuk say? Miloya Vienu, Lashon Yochid, Lashon Singular, Mash Machad. Rabbi Shmuel, what's he going to say for this pasuk? No, Mevayla to tell us the chai for all of it. Shalom Uchayev, Ve'ein Chayev Elachasa, which we're going to see. This is actually going to be a very big machlekes, which we're going to see in Kuf Chesem base. So Rabbi Shmuel Taka learns this pasuk to tell us the only chai for the shalom. Rabbi Kiva, where does he know this? Nafkalei, when it says Melasais Oisai, what's Oisai mean? What's it mean? All of it. Rabbi Shmuel, Chalam Mukter B'fnim, Shechatz Ve'elu B'chutz. We need it for both. V'chalam Mukter Chutz, Shechatz Ve'elu B'chutz. So tomorrow, Tanya, like we taka see, we're going to show us this brisa is like a Bishmuel, this concept of Tanya, Bishmuel Leimer. Yachol muknif nim shechatz v'elu b'chutz chayv. Tam Leimer lasses aisel shalom chayv and chayv l'chasses. So again, we brought us a geshmak, a brisa to show us shitas of Bishmuel. Zok the Gemara of Rabbi Kiva. Let's go back to Rabbi Kiva. Muknif nim. How would he know this? Muknif nim shechatz v'elu b'chutz chayv. Rabbi Kiva would hold. Oh, sorry, Rabbi Kiva muknif nim shechatz v'elu b'chutz chayv. Zok the Gemara of Rabbi Kiva. Now we have to go back to Rabbi Kiva. How is he going to work with the Bishmuel Psukim? Rabbi Kiva Adam Yichashiv Ma'abalei. So tomorrow the Rabbi Shchita Saif. Where's the Bishmuel going to learn in a scenario of Shchita Saif? So tomorrow Rabbi Shmuel Nafkalim Oya Sheyishchat to tell Shchita Saif. So tomorrow Rabbi Kiva Malach no Mevayla Sheichadu Chayiv V'Lo Elamaylik to tell us that if a person Sheichet is Chayiv but a Malika is not considered anything. He's not Chayiv a Malika outside. Rabbi Shmuel, Nafkala, Mizeh Hadover. What's a Zeh Hadover coming to teach us? The Tanya Sheyishchat. What do we know about Tamalima? Sheyishchat. Yachal, you would think of a Malik should be Chayiv Dinu. Mashchita. The Indach Shechsher B'fnim. Malach we do inside the base English not good. But you still Chayiv. Malika Shederch Shechsher B'fnim. Ain't it? Didn't you Chayiv Tamalima? Zeh Hadover. So we clearly see that Rabbi Shmuel is learning Zeh Hadover for Malika. The Inach Chayiv. Rabbi Kiva Malachal will tell you whom Mivayle. You need this for what? For Gzer Shava. Again, it's not our sugya. Zeh Hadavar, it's a sugya of Tars Nadarim. That over there, there's a whole shayla. Chacham learning from Gzer Shava. That Tars Nadarim doesn't need mumchim. Rather, 3 yait is good enough. But the point is, he learns it for a different sugya of Gzera Shava. Zok Demar V'Aditanan HaKoimitz V'Hamakabel Dama B'Chutz Potter. So where do we know this concept? This Mishnah tells us that a person does a B'Chutz, he's Potter Minola. Zok Demar Mechatei the Chayiv. Why? Or you tell me potter? Why do I need it? You tell me where's the pasuk to tell me a potter? In order to understand Torah, you first need to understand chiyuv. Umecha teisi the chayiv. Tomorrow, you know where you should think you chayiv. Teisi, you should learn it out from shchita. Mal shchita, the what? Shekein nifseles. We all know by shchita, shekein nifseles. What are we discussing? Shaloi leichlim bepesach. We all know if a person shechs, if a person is not roy fachila. What's the case of not roy fachila? You have a chayla, you have a zokin. Who can't eat the kazayis? It's coming from the psukim. It says ishlefi eichla. He has to be right lachila. Such a person, you're chayiv. Mashain kain by karban mincha. And the kaimitz. Oh, this is our sugya where you don't have such a concept. So again, how would it work? You want to learn taste of shchita? It's not going to work. Shchita, mala shchita. Shekein himself shalayachlim pesach. Tasty, maybe you should learn out from Zrika. Again, we're trying to find us why in the world should you think you're chayiv in order to question. Where's the pasuk that you potter? You want to learn from shchita? Ma'ala shchita. Shekein nifsal shaloi loichlin. Pesach, like we just said. You're going to learn how to taste him is Zrika. Ma'ala Zrika. What is the halacha by Zrika? Shekein zor chayav alav misa. The halacha is Mashain by pizza kabbalah, which again the nakuda is Zrika. The reason why chayav is because it needs to be Rashi's masber. It needs to be avoida tama. It needs to be a ending avoida. So dafka is Zrika. Mashain the comments of mincha is not. So again. By Kaimetz and the Kabbalah which they have after Avodah, you won't be chayiv. Zok the Mara Teisi, maybe you'll say, well, on the topic of Zayin of a base. Maybe you should learn out from a Tzad Shava. Teisi me benaya. What would be the tzad hashava? Would be shchita and zrika. And Rashi's masber. What would be the tzad hashava? What are you going to tell me? You want to learn out from shchita? You're going to tell me shchita has the concept of chaylev zakein. Zrika should show us there's no problem. Zrika is chayiv by a zar. Meshenkin komitz kabbalah is not. I'll tell you shchita. Then this is the tzad hashava that the both is avoida and yichayev. So to bring kmitza v'kabbalah, which is avoida, should be chayev. So tomorrow I'll show you that we don't have a concept of tzad hashava. Why? Because im kain lo yayma b'zrika. Why is zrika b'chlal? Do you need it? Learn out itself from a tzad hashava what shchita and akrova. V'teisi mibenaya that what v'teisi l'mishchita mal shchita shekain ifsal sholo shem eichel mechapesach. Taisi mahallah akrova should show us mahallah shekain yishna b'mincha. V'teisi mibenaya, and that we're saying it doesn't work. Lachik sibkra l'meimar lo the lo yosem mibenaya. You can't learn out from this concept of a tzad hashav. Omer Ravo shachat v'zorak l'divrei b'shmol. What is the halacha? Chayiv achas. So again, to understand this, we need to know where they're coming from. The psukim. What do we have? We saw them at Aleph. Either they're coming from the psukim, oy zavach, or dam yichoshev. Now, on that we're trying to say, Zok Gemara, Ravo is going to say as follows. When you did a shchita and a zrika, now you're coming from the pasuk, dam shafach. What is dam shafach? Talking about shchita, zrika, etc., everything else. Therefore, if you tell me shchita is zrika, you're only chayv al-achas, not two, because it's all in the same pasuk. Omer Ravo shachach v'zok devishmol, chayv achas, because it's coming from the pasuk, the concept of shchita and zrika. However, the divrei Rebbe Kiva, what is the halacha? Chayiv shtayim. Abai amano. Feel the divrei Rebbe Kiva, even according to Rebbe Kiva, that's coming from the other psukim, einoi chayiv al-achas. Why? The Amar cross sham tasa. Hakosav asan lekulan avoid achas. However, zarak vehela, now you go in the opposite extreme, which are krova, which has nothing to do with the pasuk of dam shafach, the divrei Rebbe Shmuel, you'd be chayiv shtayim. However, the Rebbe Kiva, according to Rebbe Kiva, it's coming like we just saw earlier. Rebbe Kiva is coming the pasuk oy zevach, which discusses also the concept of a krova. Ein chayiv al-achas. Abayamano. I feel that Rebbe Kiva, you'll be chayiv shtayim. Lachi pelignu krova. Sham talav v'sham tasa to tell sham talav v'sham tasa. And the third case, then a scenario where you did a shchita, you did a zrika, and you did a krova, then according to Rishmal and Bein Rishmal, Bein Rebbe Kiva, everyone agrees, you're chayiv shtayim, because it's not relevant. Even according to Rishmal, that's coming from the pasuk of dam shafach, you're going to tell me you're chayiv for what? Shvich and zrika is one, but you have a krova. And according to Rebbe Kiva, they're going to put a krova together, you have the concept of earlier of zrika. So tomorrow, however, Zok Gemara, however, in a scenario of shachat v'zark velo divra kol chayiv shtayim. Zok the Heilig Gemara Tana Rabbanan. It says in the pasuk again. There's a shayla to read the parentheses or not. B'machane. It says in the pasuk b'machane. Yachal ha'shoichet oyle b'darim yishia b'chayiv tamaloymar mechutz ha'machane. Yachal should be even chutz shalosh machanos. Tamaloymar oy oz b'nachane. Minayin, how do you know af machane leviyah? Tamaloymar b'machane. Even machane, you should think Yachal ha'shoichet oyle b'darim yachayv. Tamaloymar oy mechutz ha'machane. To tell us mechutz ha'machane is miyuchod she'ein roy l'shchitas kachem v'l'shchitas kol zevach yatsa daraim she'af b'shein roy l'shchitas kachem. It's still roy l'shchitas kachem kal. Therefore, we can understand. The point is, we're trying to bring out in such a case. Hagam over here, it's aser. You won't be chayiv. You won't be chayiv a chorus or a chatas in a scenario where you did it by mistake. Amar Ula. Ula wants to say, therefore, hashoichit al gagoy shel hechel. So a person did a shchita on the gag of the hechel. Where is that? How do you look at it? Do you look at it as a shchitas chutz or not? Zok Ula, it's considered a shchitas chutz. One kuf zayin and base the middle of the amid by Ula. And he says as follows: Hoyul the ein royu l'shchitas kol zevach. So I look at it in a simple level of shchitas chutz, and therefore I'm chayiv. Maskelo Rava im kein nichter kral mechutz hamachane. Why do you need the pasuk of what? El Pesach HaMoyed v'loi boi El Pesach HaMoyed El Pesach HaMoyed lamuli. What is the whole pasuk coming to tell us? El Pesach HaMoyed in a simple level to get the context. It sounds like the nekuda is as long as it's inside, even though it's not maybe the makoin roiv akrava, but it's in the Pesach HaMoyed, you'll be chayiv. Zok tomorrow, we're understanding El Pesach HaMoyed lamali lav l'mu'ute gagoy. Zok tomorrow, the Rava im kein nichtav El Pesach HaMoyed b'machna. Why do you need that pasuk? So you can go back and say the other way around. Maybe it's coming to include also the gagoy. So Amar Mari lesuye, it's coming in a scenario of kula b'fnim v'tzavar b'chutz. So tomorrow, tzavar b'chutz pshita. Amai kaper rachmana shchita b'chutz. So who cares? So elala suya. The case is the other way around. Kula b'chutz v'tzavara b'fnim. On that comes the pasuk and tell us in such a scenario that yichayv. Itmar. What is the halacha we're going to discuss in a simple level? Kitcher rishayna, kitcher l'shaita. The kitcher l'asalav. We discussed this a few times throughout Chas. This concept on a simple level. Do we have today the Beis Chira? Do we have today the kedusha or not? So it's a big machlokes. Hamal, someone who's makriv bisman hazeh. Again, we're going to discuss this actually machlokes. If you have to be makriv on a mizbeach or a selah, that's going to be the future mishnayos. But on a simple level, what is the halacha? Someone who's makriv bisman hazeh. Rabbi Yochanan, Amachayv, Rish Lakish, Amapater. What would be the machlokes? Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. Zok the Mars Faust. Rabbi Yochanan, Amachayev, why you chayv as man hazeh? Very simple. Kitcher Rishayna. This is the concept called Kitcher Rishayna. Kitcher L'shaita. The Kitcher L'salavai. Therefore today, Avad Yechayev. But Rish Lakish Amapater, because Kitcher Rishayna, Kitcher L'shaita. But like Kitcher L'salavai. This is the big machlokes. If we say till today, do we have kedusha or not? Zaktumar, name of this machlokes of Rabbi Yochanan and Shalkish is actually machlokes Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shua. Name of the pelukta Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shua Kamifli. What is this machlokes? Is the Tanan? Rabbi Eliezer when they built the Heichel. Kishri binding by Heichel ice and climb. They had the current Heichel. They climbed Bazars. However, the question is, where were the workers? I know. Did you put on a simple level? Did you put the curtains to block the workers from viewing inside the Heichel? Therefore, in such a scenario, if you picture it, you would have the wall, and then the workers working outside the wall, or the other way around, almost like the rabbin not to see, but the workers working inside. Uba'azara b'nei mufnim. And Amar Rabbi Shua, this is the raya. It says, Rabbi Shua says, Shematu shem akrivin, afapi shem bayis v'oichlin kachakachim afapi shem kloim, and kachakalam I say shem afapi shem chayma. Why? Mipnei shekitcher rishayna, kitcher l'shayta, v'kitcher l'asalavi. So Rabbi Shua is going to tell us the what? The concept of kitcher l'asalavi, lav, Rabbi Elazar, it's arguing, la mechlad, Rabbi Elazar savar, like kitcher. And that's why what? That's why you have to make this taka, you have to make this kloim, because this is sukkah and shavuos. The Rashi brings down the sukkah of Yudalad and Beis, where discusses that the halacha is you need to have a physical structure. So if they started off with the least curtains, that's why you need it. Why? Because kitcher rishayna, kitcher l'shaita, the kitcher l'asalavi. However, Rabbi Elazar holds not. Amar Lavina Lavashi Mimai. Del Maltaino. The Kula Amma is no shaykhs. Del Makula Amma Kitcher Rishayna Kitcher Shaita. Yes, the Kitcher L'asalavi. Umar the Shmila. Each one just saying what they heard. Come up. You're going to ask me, if it has nothing to do with Kitcher Rishayna Kitcher Shaita Kitcher L'asalavi, why in the world do you need the curtains? I'll tell you. Very simple. It's Nias Ba'ama. Let's news of Ba'ama. Very good. Shmak. Therefore, it's not right. Itmar. Now we're going to have a discussion of halacha of the shiurim of kezayis of tziruf or not. So now we're going to start off the shiur of an etzem. An etzem is a bone. Etzem is no shaykhs. However, what is the halacha? We all know you can be makavit. More than that, we're going to discuss if you should put it back in all of the erdu. If there's even a mitzvah, we're going to see in a moment even by melach, where the Torah tells us explicitly to make sure it's salted. But on a simple level, etzem on its own, everyone agrees it's not a shiur. The question becomes, what is the halacha when you have the etzem, which is a little less than kezayis, and you have basar, which is a little less than kezayis? Maybe look at it together, and therefore what? On a simple level, it's an animal with the etzem. Who cares? So Zok Gemara as follows: Hamala the ain by kezayis. However, the etzem is mashlim the kezayis, and that's Zok Gemara, what we call chibur island. Even though it's avada on its own, it's nothing, but avada can be attached. So Zok Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan Mechayv, Rish Lakish Amapater. What is the beer machlekes? Zok Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan Mechayv. Why? How do we look at chibur island? Something that's attached to ayla, kailin dami. Therefore, you are makriv. Everyone agrees you're makriv because ayis. But Shalkish Amapater, because chibur island, lav kailin dami. Okay, so that's the case of what? That's the case of etzem. Now we're going to discuss the case of melach. Hamala roish ben yoina shein b'kezayis. However, umelach is mashlima lekezayis mau. So we're discussing. Rashi says we're discussing the oila. More than that, Rashi brings down, says in the pasuk v'leitashbis melech bris, that the halacha is even for whatever reason salt either went off it, you forgot to do it, you got to go dip it in salt and put it back. Maybe that's taka why I think today we're makbid damar al shulchan melech comes from this. Shein b'kezayis umelach mashlima lekezayis mau. So what is the halacha? Amalei Rava right away brings the Lavashi. Isn't this the machlekes Rabbi Yehuda Spitz? One of the rule is different by the bone versus melach, and that's like the more no. Tiboy, you can have the shayla or tiboy Rabbi Yehuda, tiboy Rish Lakish. Tiboy Rabbi Yehuda will tell you Akalam Kamer Chanacha, Rabbi Yehuda Hasam. Dafka la'etzem, because we can understand it much better. Everyone agrees the meaning of the basru. It's part of the bone. It can even eat the marrow sometimes. It's somewhat of an animal. Of a melech, which is mamash no shaychis lav, another by yainu light. And Tibar Shlakish. I'll tell you, I can look at my Shlakish Hasam, LED Parish Mina, Lav Mitzvah Sukkah. There's no chiyuv to go back to make sure to put it back on. However, but the Melech, like we saw Rashi earlier says, Avalachadi Parish, Mitzvah La Sukkah, it's Taka Mechuyev, Taka to go back and dip it in the salt. Therefore, and again, what are you going to blind with? We're going to blind with a Teku if it's considered a Kizayis or not. Rabbi Yosef Aglili Ayme B'chulei. So we saw in the beginning of the parak, Rabbi Yosef Aglili had a few tainas on Chachamim, which we discuss Shchita B'chutz. He wanted to say if a person did a Shchita B'chutz, V'hala B'chutz is potter, and that Chachamim said, I don't understand. Every time you Yotze, what is the halacha? You do a Shchita B'chutz, it's apostle. So what is Taka going to be Rabbi Yosef's response back? So the Gemara is going to bring Rabbi Yosef, for whatever reason, we're not bringing Rabbi Yosef's response, either he didn't respond, but we're going to see Hey Shiv Rabbi. Rabbi answered for Rabbi Yosef response to this. Hey, Shiv Rabbi Tachas Rabbi Yosef Galili. And he says as follows to Rabbanan. Don't compare it. Your time it was. Sheikhet B'fnim. Every time Sheikhet B'fnim goes outside, how do you, Rabbi Yosef Galili, understand? He says as follows. Hey, Shiv Rabbi Tachas Rabbi Yosef Galili. Ma'ala Sheikhet B'fnim, Ma'ala B'chotz. That we understand. Rabbi Yosef Galili is going to be Maida. Why? Shahoi Saloi Shasa Kosher. What is Rabbi Yosef Galili's taina? B'shchitas Chotz. They never had time of Sheikhet B'chotz, Ma'ala B'chotz. Shaloi Hai Saloi Shasa Kosher. Very good shman. And then, that was one time actually back. Hey, Shavuot Shem, and he also answered Tachas Rabbi Glili, Mal Sheikha B'fnim, Umal B'chotz, Shekain Kodesh Mekabel. You can't compare it, because over there it had what? The Beis HaMikdash, we all agree, B'shchita B'fnim, even Rabbi Yosef Glili, even Chachamim, all agree that at the time it was in, it was good. Time Sheikha B'chotz, Shem Kodesh Mekabel. So tomorrow right away, my benai, they both sound on a simple level, very similar. The point is, Shas HaKodesh, Shas Kabbalah. What's the nafkamina? My benayu. If you have, who cares? If it's a Kabbalah, which is the Kli, you need a Kli to be Makabal. The point is that they both sound very simple. And the Gemara as follows. I'll find you two nafkaminas. Amaziri, the Shchitas Laila, Ike benayu. What would be the halacha of a Shchitas Laila? So according to Rabbi, what is the halacha? Shachat Laila, where would you shecht it? Very geschmack. You shechted it inside. So since you shechted it inside, V'hala B'chot, Shachat B'heima B'Laila B'fnim, didn't have a Shasa Kosher. Because according to Rabbi Lazar, what is the halacha? Shchita B'Laila. It's puzzle. It never had a moment there was a Shasa Kosher. However, according to Rabbi Lazar, in the second case, what would be the halacha? It's still Hegdish Mekabli. Why? Because in Allah, Rashi's Masber, in Malala Yerit. So Taka work Ikbenayu, Rav Amma Kabbalah B'Klichol Ikbenayu. Again, there's no Shasa Kosher. That everyone agrees. However, still Kodesh Mekabli. That will work. We're going for Rashi's Maz. We're going Shchita B'Layla. The man damage is Shchitas and Nifzel Zok Rashi. Shaloi Sol Shasa Kosher. The B'Shchitas and Nifzel. We're going to the man damage. Avada the Shchita B'Layla does not work. Tomish Acha B'Kodesh V'Chuli. Again, what was Chacham's taina? Every time you touch to eat something, you touch it, you become tummy. Now we discussed already. Avada Taisa says you could find the case where you put it in your mouth. B'Lav Orchit. So what would Rabbi Yossi answer to that? So Tomish Acha B'Kodesh V'Chuli. Right away, the Zaktimar, Shabbat Kamal Rabban Rabbi Yosef Glili. So Rava says as follows: Kol heicha de nitma tumas aguf va'achakach nitma basa the kulam alei pligi de chayv. Shekein tumas aguf b'kars. So on a simple level, Rashi's Masber we all know ein iser chalal iser, and then we have iser koil. We could have a taina that you have to remember. Let's use the case as follows: Sunday the person became tummy. Monday the kachim became tummy. So in such a case, where on Sunday you became tummy, what is the halacha? Since you're tummy, you can't eat what? Even kachim that are tahar. Now that you can't eat kachim and tahar, you had a plate that you saw was ready tummy. But you either way tummy. Now we have a concept of Issa Kail. Issa Kail teaches you that once you become this was already tummy. Doesn't make a difference if I become tummy? No, however, when you have a concept, now that I became tummy, then the second portion becomes tummy. Now we can understand Issa Kail to make it the Chayiv, even the something that was already tummy. So I want to say as follows: there's no machlokes. On Sunday you were tummy. Why? Because of Issa Kail. The question becomes is what? Sunday the basar became tummy. What? Then Monday you became tummy. Nitma guf. The Rabbanan Savri, Aminon, Migu. Rabbanan going to come into the concept of Issa Koil Chal Issa Acher. However, basically, no, we don't say Migu. However, lo yaminu migu, it's not going to work. Rabbi Yossi zok tomorrow nihid, the migu lo yaminun, teisi tumas agov techamira, v'tachol al tumas bas. Reflecting mara, lemaisa, very nice, you don't have to come out to this migu v'sakailo, but you should find the concept of tumas agov, which is much more chamer. Zok tomorrow, Ravashi, b'mai, the tumas agov. It's chamura, mechatesi, zok Ravashi as follows. How do you know tumas agov is chamura? You could go both ways. One has the concept, tumas agov, very nice, it's more chamer, but there's always a concept of, you go to the mikvah and become tar. Doma tumas agov, basar chamur shekina in the type of mikvah, therefore you can't bring that. Zok tomorrow, regish mak the mishnah. Each one has, on a simple level, each one has its milos and chisrainis. What's the milos and chisrainis? What is the halacha b'shchita? Which we're going to see in the Gemara. The Gemara is going to bring this all out. It's someone who shechs v'hedit chayiv. V'hamala, however, someone who's makriv l'hedit potter. Rashi throws in, wait a second, you still, either way, it should be chayiv avodah zarah for doing it for somebody else. Zok Rashi, you know what that nafkamin is? Where you did a maisa b'mezid for that person. So you're not chayiv chatas because you did a b'mezid. In a scenario where you're hazer for avodah chavim, but you were shaygig by that krav b'chutz. In such a case, nafkamin if you be chayiv a chatas or not. And chaymer b'aliyah, what's the chaymer? Shnayim sha'achzu b'sakim v'shachtu, shnayim sh'shachtu p'turim. However, achzu b'evalu, shnayim sh'a did it together. We're going to have to see why. Chayavin. So therefore, it's a chamer. What is the halacha? Hella, chazer, v'hella, v'chazer, v'hella. You keep on doing over and over, and your memory keeps on going. So it's, again, the point is, you keep on forgetting. Chayev, al kol ach, al chayev, al kol aliyah, div Reb Shimon. We're going to discuss this, machlokes, Reb Shimon and Reb Yossi b'arichas, many mahalchim in the Gemara had to understand this. And Reb Yossi, ein chayev l'achas. No, the halacha, ve'ein chayev, ad she'al l'rishim mizbeach. According to Shitas Reb Yossi, it needs to have a mizbeach. We're going to see psukim from Noach. However, Reb Shimon, I'm afilala, so we're going to see psukim from Noach. Not noyach, that you does not need even a letzur, it's good enough. It's machlokes. Again, if a krav b'chutz needs to be on a mizbeach or not. Zok the more right away. My shno, what is the halacha that you're telling me that amal lahedit is potter? The chsev, like it says in the pasuk. What does it say in the pasuk? La Hashem. And we're learning from the pasuk ve'el pasach oyem moed lo yiven lafsas oisatu la Hashem. To who is the problem? Dafka Rebbeinu Shalom. For tomorrow. Okay. I got it, the Allah is not going to work the Chsiv L'Hashem. V'shchita nami, if you look inside the Pesukim also. Chsiv L'Hashem. Shani Asim, the Amakra, it says in the Pasuk, ish to tell us, even if you're sheikh a fish. Right away, the Gemara questions. Gab Allah nami Chsiv ish. No. Right away, for tomorrow. Whoa. Why are you coming to tell me ish by Akrovis v'shnayim and by Shchita it's v'nat? What is the difference? Yachich nami to say by Shchita. Mivoyle l'shnayim shachsu b'sakin v'shachtu shechayavin. So tomorrow, no. Shani Akra, Shani Asim, the Amakra. What does it say in the Pasuk? Over there in Pasuk Daled, what does it say? Ahu. To tell us, for tomorrow, I don't understand this. Yachi Gabelo Nami, Haksiv, Ahu. Go look inside of the Pasuk test. It has the exact same lotion of Ahu. So tomorrow, Mivayle, on the top of Kufchesam Beis, Mivayle Lemute, it's coming the scenario of Shayig, Oines, Umutter. That you need to be the what? In such a case, Shagig, Lemute, Shayig, Onus, Umutter, comes Ahu to tell us otherwise. So tomorrow, Yachi Chanami, Mivayle, no, Trey Ahu Ksivi. Actually, if you look inside Pasuk Dalid, it says Ahu twice. It says Dai Michashiv La'ishahu, and then it says V'nechas Eshahu. Since it says both, we can understand that. But this is talking about Avada by the Shchita. What do you do with the Shem by Shchita? You don't need it. L'char says Ahu twice. Ve'ela La'Shem Lamali L'hoitzi Sorim Mishtaleach. Which we're going to learn soon that the halacha is you're not chayiv b'chutz. Chaymer b'hala v'chulei. Why? The shtayim she'asu you're chayiv. Mashenkin by shchita. Shtayim she'asu. The Mishnah tells us shtayim she'asu by shchita is part. Shok the Gemara. Tana Rabbanan. Ish. Ma tamalayma. The Rabbi shtayim she'asu be'eva olo shechayavim. She'achal you would think v'aloydinu. Uma hashoichet. Just like behead shchita. Lehed shechayiv. But still, this is the Mishnah. Shtayim she'asu b'sakim shachta b'turin. You would think Amal Lahedish Potter, Ein Adin Shnaim Shachsu should be Turin Tamalaymar, and that would say in the pasuk of Ish. Who is this? Divrei Reb Shimon. However, Zok Rabbi Yossi Aymino Ahu to tell us Echad V'Lo Shnaim. Im Kain, what are you going to do with the pasuk of Ish? No, Divrei Torah. Im Kain Matamalayim Ish. Divrei Torah Galoshim Ne'ada. Zok tomorrow Reb Shimon. Hayahu. What is he going to do with Ba'alay? The Mutter Shayga Einis Mutter. Rabbi Yosef. Where does he learn now? Shayga Einis Mutter. May he learns it from the hahu, the hey. Reb Shimon, where's Reb Yossi? Mahu ahu. Reb Shimon, no, ahu loy darish. Again, this has to do with diktuk, which we're not going to go so extensive. Reb Yossi, medahai by a krova ish ish divrei Torah l'shem adam. Say the same thing by shchita. Ahu by the shchita say ish ish. Nami divrei Torah l'shem adam. If so, velo shechla had to be know chayiv. So tomorrow nafka lay from where medam yechashiv. What does it say? La'ishahu, which is miyosher. La'ishahu medam yechashiv la'ishahu dam shofech to tell us vafilu hashoichid leish. We saw in the Mishnah, we saw in the Mishnah, Machlokes, Reb Shimon and Reb Yossi. Reb Shimon says, Chayiv al kol achas v'achas. Reb Yossi, however, argues, Reb Yossi says, Ein chayiv ela achas. Now we're going to see this Machlokes, Reb Yossi and Reb Shimon, four different mahalchim. We're going to see Shitas Reb Yechanan. We're going to start with Shitas Rish Lakish. Shitas Reb Yechanan. Then we're going to see Ula, which Ula itself has two Lashonis, Lishna Kama, Lishna Basra. And then we're going to see Avur the Shmuel. So let's jump inside. We have to stay focused over here because it's quite extensive. What is the Machlokes? Amar Rish Lakish, Machlokes, Bedalid, Vehei, Avar. Now what? The whole Machlokes is, we're talking about one animal, but not one Avar and chopped up pieces. Rather, a bunch of different limbs. The Mar Savar, Reb Yossi, Kiksiv, when it says in the pasuk Lasis Aisai, to tell us there's no such thing as being chayiv and a bunch of different limbs. The only time you chayiv is for one animal. Therefore, you keep it going. Picture you have a big animal and your mom has chopped it up and you keep it thrown into the fire. The nakud is you only chayiv for what? You don't look at it piece by piece. Rather, you look at the whole animal from the atzma. That's what the pasuk is telling. Lasis Aisai, all of it. Avada every single time. You're not throwing it in one shot. You're doing a maisa, chol maisa, v'maisa. But the point is, you're only chayiv for the whole maisa as a whole. That is Shitas Reb Yossi. When it says Lasas Oisel Sholom Uvachayiv and Echav L'Chasa, what's it going on? Akol Behema Ksiv. It's going on the entire Behema. However, Reb Shimon Marsava no. Akol Eva Behema Ksiv. Therefore, Avadi will agree. The limb itself, if you chop it up into multiple pieces, you're Ein Echav L'Achas. But the animal, you break it up by limb by limb. This is who Shitas Reb Rish Lakish. So on a simple level, we're going, how do you look at it? Is a kol behema all on the Aver Aver. Rabbi Yechanan, second mahalch to explain the Machlokes of Reb Shimon is as follows. Rabbi Yechanan, no. The Machlokes itself is taka in a scenario, be'aver echad. So the whole Machlokes is talking about what Yutaka had one limb. And what happened? And where did you shecht it? You shecht it inside. Machlokes be'aver echad. Zogt Reb Shimon, the Mar Savar mukta v'fnim shechasu ve'ela b'chutz chayiv. Zogt Reb Yossi, no. Mar Savar potter. However, B'daled v'hei avarin, divrei kol. Chayav kol ever. Again, so the whole Machlokes would be, is, in a scenario of one Aver. Zogt Maro, upliga de Ula. Ula, again, this is the Ula Shnekama. What is the Machlokes, the third opinion? Da'am Ula. Hakol maidim, zogt Ula shmimukta v'fnim shechasu ve'ela b'chutz chayiv. So what would be the Machlokes? Loi nechleku dafko b'chutz b'chutz. Ela b'mukta b'chutz shechasu ve'ela b'chutz. That's the Machlokes. Rabbi Yossi says potter, Reb Shimon says chayiv. The Masav potter, Masav chayiv. Ikadamri, this is Ula Lishna Basra. Ikadamri, Ula kol maidim b'mukta b'chutz shechasu b'chutz ve'ela b'chutz. Shu potter. The whole Machlokes is b'fnim b'chutz. Loi nechleku b'mukta b'fnim shechasu ve'ela b'chutz. The Masav potter, Masav chayiv. And the fourth opinion, which we're going to see, Pligad Avur the Shmuel, is Lishna Kama de Ula. However, the Amar Avur the Shmuel, Keman, who does the halacha is Mahadrinon Upaikin. This is a sugya where you have the animal in his back where it bursted. That the gam is back, Keman, to like Rabbi Yossi. It's going not like Shita Rabbi Yossi. Who is this? Who is Lishna Kama? The Rabbi Yossi would hold in such a case. What do we say? Rabbi Yossi would hold in such a case. So it comes out on a simple level. To give a quick summary, we have four different opinions of the Machlokes in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi and Reb Shimon. How do we understand? Again, we're going with Shitas Rashi. The way we explain Shitas Taisus has a whole different mahalach. It's not Daf Yomi. We're going to do it on a simple level. We're going through Shitas Rashi. Rish Lakish, we just saw a moment ago, the Machlokes is when a person's makriv a few limbs of one animal. What is the halacha? Zok Reb Yossi. It's called a kol behema ksiv in a chavalachas achas. Zok Reb Shimon. No, it's called a kol ever ve'ever. Then we have Shitas Reb Yechanan. The Machlokes, what are we discussing? That a person was makriv what? A few little pieces of what? Of in a scenario you shechted b'fnim and you shechted with Aver Achas. Zok Shimon, Yechayev, a kol chelik v'chelik. Mamash in every piece. Why? He's Zok Rashi. He's coming from the halacha, just like we understand the impaku that if it bursted, you return it. So too, Yechav kol chelik. However, Rabbi Yossi is going to say potter. Because again, the Torah is not discussing in a scenario of Ivarim that were split up into a bunch of pieces, you're not chayiv. However, they both agree, by shchita b'chutz, the potter. So again, the whole machlokes according to Rabbi Yochanan is shchita b'fnim. Then we had Ula. Ula is lishna kama. The machlokes is Dafka shchita b'chutz, not like Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan wants to say shchita b'chutz. Everyone agrees you potter. Zok Ula no. Im b'shchita b'chutz is the machlokes. Rabbi Yossi holds you potter. Why? Since we're understanding that when it says in the pasuk, it's coming to be ma'it, such a case in a vorim that we're missing. Rabbi Shimon says no. We're talking about Dafka pachutz mekazayis in a scenario you'd be potter. And then we had Ula lishna basra, which is basically shitas Rabbi Yochanan. The nekuda is shenishchat b'fnim v'hikr b'chutz. And then we had Ula's. And then we had Avur the Shmuel. Shmuel's Tata, that was very similar to Rabbi Yochanan and Ula's Lishna Basra, but he's Mechalik in Pshat. How do you understand Shitas Rabbi Yossi that he's saying, according to Avur the Shmuel, Rabbi Yossi holds Pakai Murim, you don't return it to the Mizbeach. However, Rabbi Yochanan is going to say you do it. However, we saw the Lishna Kama the Ula, that according to Rabbi Yossi, what is the halacha? You are Paka, you are Chayser. Wow, okay. The halacha is, we saw you only chayiv in the Mishnah until it's Dafka on the Mizbeach. So what is the machlekes Rabbi Yossi or Rabbi Shimon if he needed to be a mizbeach or not? Zok the Mars follows Rav Yehuda my time Rabbi Yossi says the pasuk. You know where Rabbi Yossi is coming from? It says by Noach. Vayiven Noach. What does it say? Mizbeach laHashem. Rabbi Yehuda my time Rabbi Shimon yikach min Noach is gediz and esamincha v'yal alatzur. It just says a rock. It doesn't need to be a mizbeach v'yal alatzur Hashem. Zok the Mars according to Rabbi Shimon v'yidach nami v'chsev. How are you going to understand the psukim of Noach v'chsev v'yim mizbeach laHashem? No, who go b'Bama? Stam very balbatish. It's from just to tell us the height. V'idach Rabbi Yossi nami chsev hikach menoyach. Al chaytz abam rai. You don't need a mizbeach. No, hiras sure ha'isen it's not a rai. V'ibesema hay in the time of the B'Shimon the time of B'Shimon Leimer says the pasuk mizbeach pesachayim mayir v'mizbeach b'bama lefikach hello sela even chayiv. Right away the Gemara says chayiv. It comes lefikach. It's coming to tell us since there's no mizbeach with the bama, it should be yaitze. Yaitze mevayle hachi kamer. What are we discussing chayiv is b'shas isa bama. It's hachi kamer. When are you chayiv lefikach b'shas iser habamas? That's how you read it. Hello, asel even chayiv. Boy, Rabbi Yossi Chanina keren the kevish v'yisoid revua mashi akva b'bama. Again, this is only shitas. Rabbi Yossi holds the nina mizbech. What is the halacha? Amalei Rabbi Yirmiyah Tanya. We learned already. Keren the kevish v'ribua. This is mamish like the shiurim. I don't think it means to mean. Maybe ribua does mean the 32 amas with the 32 amas, or it just means a square. Okay, could be just a simple level pasha. It just means a square. Avadi, you don't need a carbon copy of the mizbeach. It's good enough. Okay, can we give us your ribua be a site? Makvin b'magdayla the aim makvin b'magdana. Again, b'magdayla is the b'mag tziburis that was standing at the time. Rashi's masber standing at the time never given. That we understand by b'magdama, which has heta b'mais. There it's not ma'akev. Therefore, you don't need takai keren. You don't need a k. You don't need a kivush. V'chule v'chule. Zok the heilige Mishnah. Echad kachim ksherim ve'echad kachim kal psulim. Shay psulim b'kaidish. Psulim b'kaidish. We learned this lafuke. We had the shaila earlier. Psulim b'kaidish. I think it was Peidali we discussed. By Reveya, Nirva, we have certain animals that the puzzle nothing to do with the base of Mikdash, even beforehand. However, saying echad kachim ksherim ve'echad kachim psulim shay psulim b'kaidish. Ve'krivan b'chutz yechayiv. Hamale. Kazayas min ha'oila. So kazayas min ha'oila min emurim. Rashi's masber doesn't mean a full kazayas, rather a chetzi kazayas. Kazayas together min ha'oila hu min ha'emurim. So it's a chetzi kazayas from the oila, chetzi kazayas from the emurim. The halach is b'chut chayiv. Why? We're discussing the kula kala. We're discussing the oila, and it gets completely burned. Tana Rabbanan says in the pasuk asher yala oila oy zevach. This is the psukim again. V'yikra zayin. This is the psukim of ches. It says asher yala oila zevach. Ein le ala oila. Minal rabbis ibura hashem ve'imur chatas ve'imur kachim kachim. Rashi's masber. It's the kifsa atzeres ve'imur kachim kalim tamalay ma zevach. Minal rabbis hakoymitz ve'alavayno ve'aktayro the minchas kahanim the minchas kaisim Mashiach ve'menasach shloishes lugei yayin v'shloishes lugei mayim. We're discussing again, which is shloishes lugei yayin is the least of the shir ben esachim. And the shloisha lugin mayim we're talking about on Sukkos. Tamalayim says in the pasuk of Pesach Hamayid lo yaviana. Call about the Pesach Hamayid chayav and lebechutz ve'ein lekachim cheirim. Minal rabbis fulin kegoyin. So the Gemara halon va'yitz va'tomei v'shenish chutz chuzmanim chutz mekamich spiegel v'shekibloi psulin. Psulin means that noshim psulin. Then they went v'zokos tomei or v'anitana lamata shenas lamala. Again, we all know lamala lamata is the oilas ha'oif and the chatas behema is the only two things that you do on top of the red line. Everything else, the bottom of the line. V'anitan l'maylo shenasan l'mato, v'anitan b'chutz shenasan b'fnim, v'anitan b'fnim shenasan b'chutz, u'pesa v'chat shenasan shaloi l'shmon. Minayin, Tamalayim says in the pasuk, lo yeven el. Tell us, call hamiskabel Pesach. Oyel moyed, the halacha is chayav and olav b'chutz. It's chayav b'chutz. Zok the hele gemara amalek kazayis min oyla v'chulei. So he said, a person did a chetzi kazayis from the oyla and a chetzi kazayis from the krova. What is the halacha? What is the halacha in such a scenario? Oyla, zok the gemara, oyla ve'mura in. We make a dik. Dafka the oyla and the murim. However, the shlomim ve'murim light. Like the Mishnah already tells us, right away we can understand when it says oyla. Rashi really says the kula kol. So we understand the oyla is completely burnt. So oyla ve'murim in shlomim murim light. So tomorrow we even find this in the brayso. Tanina la the Tana Rabbanan. It says oyla ve'murim is mitzdarvin lechazayis la loisim b'chutz l'chayv l'machum pikul noisiv v'tamei. So therefore we clearly see this concept dafka v'ayla. So zok tomorrow bishlama laha loisim, which is going to that krova, they change of either gersa or Allah. We understand oilog because that krava, like Rashi says, gets completely burnt. The cholin shlomalai ela pigol. The question becomes on the pigol nice of a tummy. Zok tomorrow. How do you understand? Why should it be different? My taima. Why should it be suddenly not chayiv? My taima. V'atanan. And again, we're discussing why should it be mechayiv to be mitzdarv with the shlom and murim for the pigol basav taima. Then we have the concept. It's father shaykh like shlom and pigol. Everyone agrees to that. V'atanan. Call hapigulim mitzdarfin, the cholin asar mitzdarfin. So the chayra, more than that, we have a brayso that clearly says that by pigul and nicer, it is mitzdarif. It's a Mishnah Me'ilah. So Gemara kasha pigul, you have the Mishnah Me'ilah against our brayso, and kasha nicer for the Mishnah Me'ilah. It says nicer is mitzdarif to our brayso. On that, the Gemara answers no. Pigul, first kasha was, we're going on the pigul like kasha. The Mishnah where it talks about Mishnah Me'ilah, where it says it's mitzdarif, Mishnah kan be pigul. Where you talk ahead, you ate it. In a scenario where you ate it, the Vadi Yechai, the Mishnah Pigul. And Khan, what this Bryce is discussing is the Machshavas Pigul. And Rashi's master, the reason why Machshava doesn't work, we learned this already. The Ein Machshava B'Aktara, the Ein Maktara B'Machshava. You can't have the opposites. Noisar like Kasha. Again, Khan ben Noisar, Ein Echnam was Taka real Noisar. The Mishnah is Taka to Khan, Besheni Tisayru, Ad Shaloi, what? Ad Shaloi Nizra Kadam. We all know. The halacha is, nicer can only really happen by a zrika. What are we talking about b'shlomim? We're talking about the sneers as follows. Talking about a b'shlomim, and there was leftover kazayas basar. Yeah, but you left over the kazayas basar b'mur. What is the halacha? If someone who has a kazayas basar left over, you can't throw it. And since you can't throw it, it's almost like balbatish. Since you can't throw it, you can't have nicer. It's not possible, because nicer is tolan zrika. But I can't do zrika. Why? Because I'm only left with the kazayas basar shlomim, which I don't throw out. What is the halacha? Very geschmack. What is the halacha by oila? Which you left over with the kazayis, then you do throw it. So if you throw it, you either mi'ilah, vadi non mi'ilah. You could have the concept of nice. Who is this? Umani Rabbi Shui, the Tanim Shaimer. Call is vachash b'toyra. Shenishtar behen kazayis basar the kazayis when the topic of Tessim base the kazayis chaylev. Zork is adam. Chetzi kazayis basar chetzi kazayis chaylev. Ain't a zork is adam. Ubayla, however, this is the point. Since you could do his rika, you could have nicer. Ubayla chetzi kazayis basar chetzi chaylev zork is adam. If neshul kol chol. Umincha, however, mincha filu kayemes lo yizruk. So tomorrow, where did mincha come in? What shach is rika? My mincha, my vita, there's no zrika l'charba. Mincha, the Gemara says, yeah, Amar Papa, you have the concept as what? Minchas nisachim abam azevach. You are going to throw it all together. However, you lost Zak Rashi va'avad b'sar zevach. You lost the bus of the zevach. You would think maybe throw out the mincha because it was going to go. Kamash malon that we don't look at bechlal as a zrika. You wouldn't touch it bechlal because the ma'isa you don't have the bus. Zak the Heilige Mishnah hakoymitz when the Mishnah the top of Kuftas on the base hakoymitz havalavoina v'haktoyris. HaKoymitz v'alavayin v'aktoyris and the minchas kahanim u'minchas koy Mashiach and the minchas nesachim shehekrev ma'achamim the halacha is kazayis b'chutz chayiv. However, Rabbi Elazar poiter ad sheyakav is kulan v'kulan shekrivam b'fneim v'shayim kazayis. He left over kazayis v'kriv b'chutz the halacha is chayiv v'kulan shechasru kolshu v'kriv b'chutz poter and the halacha is a makav kolshu v'mur b'chutz the halacha is chayiv. So again, on a simple level, we're going to discuss this extensively now. But the Mishnah is telling us, All these concepts, you have the kaimitz, you have the levina, we're talking about the levina mincha, and ketayris. Now, very crucial to understand this, that the ketayris, what did you do? You did a pras, ba'biker, and pras ben arba'im. What is that lashon pras? Pras means literally split, I think it means mechza. And the point is, a regular shear is, a moneh would be mea din kesef. Pras means a chetzi moneh. Chetzi done din kesef. So we're talking about 50, a shear 50 din kesef. So every morning, what did you do? You had to do a pras ba'biker. This is the ketayris. Pras by shachris, pras bein arba'in. And the halacha is, when it says, in such a scenario, the Mishnah comes to tell us, if anybody's makriv, even a kazayas, outside, yichayv. Why? Rashi's masber. We're discussing when it says oisoi. Again, we learned this. Oisoi is coming to tell us al shalem. What is a shalem? Shalem aktar is what? Shear of kazayas. We're going to have to see. We're going to come out. The Gemara is going to tell us. In the Chanami, pras might even be with the rabbanon. We'll have to see. The shear might even be with the rabbanon. But the point is kazayas. However, Zok Demar, in such a case, Rabbi Elazar says no. You have to be makriv anything. The second you remove anything, why he holds becomes puzzle. Anything that gets removed becomes puzzle. Therefore, not chayav. Zogt the heilig a Gemara. Tana Abana. Hamaktir kezayis b'chutz chayiv. Chetzi pras b'fnim potter. Zogt the Gemara kasak daitich. The havmin is my potter. When it says over here chetzi pras b'fnim is potter. My potter zar. The zar is potter midei shemai. That's what the havmin is. On a simple level, that if we're not talking about zar, then who is it? Zogt the Gemara. Amai haktari l'chayra. Why you potter haktara? Because we're talking about again. We're talking about when it says the mechayiv ola b'chutz elamai. This is the shir haktara. So if so, why am I in potter? Amai haktari Rav Chisda Rav. No, potter doesn't mean the zar. Potter of other zar would be chayiv. Why? Because it's taka the shir. My potter. The other way around, you potter tzibur like Rashi, they are yoytze dechavasan. Why in the world should you be potters like Rashi? Because that is the shir of Zikazayis. Amr Zeri Kashli Adam Arab. Allah on this price of Baha, Fila Belazer, Maide your potter the tzibur. That's the point. Dar Belazer, love Haktari Kamar. And how could it be Bechla? What are we discussing? Again, the point is we're discussing how could the tzibur be potter? So Amar Rabba Baktar, Dechel Kulam Alay Pligi, everyone agrees that water because ice is good enough. Keep Pligi, what are we discussing? We're talking about over here, Parvi Yom Kippurim. Baktara de Befnim. We're talking about the Parvi Yom Kippurim. Where is it? Where were you maktar? You do it inside the water Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Parvi Yom Kippurim. There, Belaz is going to tell us the Mar Safar, it says clearly in the Torah, you need to do 2 handfuls, 2 scoops. Where it talks about the Shir Parvi Yom Kippurim, Malach Hafnav Dafka. Mar Safar, no Malach Hafnav now Lav Dafka. So who's the Shitas? This is Shitas Rabbah. On that Abai says, Amalei Abaya, Vaha, ki kaksiva chuka, baktar the fnimu. Dichsiv. How could you tell me that it's not the shears? No, the shears nothing. What do you mean? It clearly explicitly tells us chayk. Whenever chayk tells us what? One word, leikuva. So chayk is ma'akib. So what is going on? Elam Abai argues in Rabbah. He says, no, baktar b'fnim kulam alay pligi. That we agree that what? You need the shear malach hafnav because of chayk. No one argues in that. So what would be the machlokes? Ki pligi baktar the chutz. We're talking about what the Parvi Yom Kippurim, but where did he do it? He did it b'chutz. Zachacham mars avar yafina. We're talking about whether he did the Parvi Yom Kippurim yafina pnim, which is the what the Parvi Yom Kippurim. Where did he do it b'chutz? Mi b'chutz. What is chutz? Is the ketayris of shachris ben Abai. Umar savar lazos lo yafina. Zok Rava. Amar Rava hashta b'chutz lo yafi rabbanon, which we're going to see in a moment. And Rav Ashi is going to be deichlis on Kuf Yud Amar Aleph. But the point is, hasha chutz b'chutz layafi rabbanan pnim chutz mivayit. So Shok Demar, what is the chutz b'chutz? Mahi. Shok Demar, the Tani yochel amala pachas mikazayis kaimet upachas mikazayis emur. V'amenasich pachas mishloishes lugin dalachit yirbiyai. Upachas mikazayis yechai tamalayim. It says lasois. Ala shalom chayim and echav l'chaser. Now v'hapachas mishloishes lugin the isbu kamazaysim. Because the point we're trying to bring a raya is that if he will learn out chutz mechutz, how could he tell me over here in the scenario over here when you had a kazayis menusach, it should be chayiv. Just like what? What is the halacha rabbi says someone who's makter b'kazayis b'chutz is chayiv. So to say the same thing by nisuch, elamay learn out chutz mechutz. Elamay because this kashi says as follows: Kegoin de kavinu shnei chatzay pras b'mona. We're talking about where you designated 2.5 the pras. Avada, we're talking about Zok Gemara, Zok Rava, Lailam, we're talking about Baktar the Hechel. and it's good aktar. So what would be the machlokes over here? Is where you have 2.5 paras b'money designated that keli. And Mar Savo on the top of Kuf Yud Amar Aleph, the Rebbe Elazar is going to tell us Kviyas Mono is considered milsahi, and if it's a milsa, therefore what would be the halacha if you chaser? The halacha is if you chaser, it's yechayiv. Therefore, in such a case, it will be puzzle. And if you puzzle, you have to be chayiv. What the Rebbe Elazar hold? Loi achi yaakov is kuloi. How do you understand kuloi? Because he holds the what? Designating in a keli is taka good designation. Therefore, missing out a little is puzzle. Whenever it's puzzle, it needs to be the bechutz. Yitaka in a chayiv ad she'yaakov is kuloi. That is shitas Rebbe Elazar. Umar savar chacham going to tell you no. La mosi. Avada what? It's nothing. And therefore what? You can understand Yechayiv. The reason why Yechayiv, in order to, basically we have to understand this files. If it's possible to be some Mikdash, I'm potter outside. Because it needs to be equal. And if I'm Chayiv if I'm not possible to be some Mikdash, I'm Chayiv outside. It's the opposites. It comes out Kula v'chumra, if we think about it. Amar Rava, Hashalam and Amar. Kiviyusha, we're going like Shitas Chacham. Hashalam and Amar Kiviyusha, the man of Alay Klumu, like we just said a moment ago. If so, so there's a by the Nisach Yain where a person was Makrav Shlomim and he was Makrav Ayla, there was a few different shiurim depending on what type of animal it was. Was it an ayil? Was it a kever? Was it a lamb? The point was it a par? And each one the Torah tells us. We learned that Shlishasin, Reviasin, Chetziin. We all know if it's a par, what does it need? Chetziin. It's the Torah tells us. Chetziin is vav lugin, 6 lugin. If it's what? If it's an ayil, Shlishahin. What Shlishahin? 4 lugin. And if it's a keves, it's chetzihin is shloisha lugin. But now that you're telling me this concept, that lav mana, the point is, even if I put it in for a par, for example, par is vav lugin, however, but it's not designation, it's worthless. Not worthless, but designation is nothing. It could come out shlishahin or vilahin could work, either for the keves, or for the what, or for the ayil. Zok Demara, now that we're saying this concept, the Kvus Leman like Klumu, Kov a Shishal apart, but Kvus is not good enough. Mashach man arba vekrim b'chot to be chayiv. Why? Shuin la'ayil, which is the shear of 4. If the same thing Kov arba la'ayil Mashach shloisha vekrim b'chot chayiv. Shuin l'kevesh. But chasru koshu, however, everyone agrees if you go under the shear, which is gimel, vekrim b'chot, then everyone agrees the botzer shloisha slugin doesn't work b'chlal, you'd be potter. However, Rav Ashi is going back to the kasha earlier. Rav Ashi is going back to earlier. What was Rava's taina on a bio? Zok Rava hash the chutz mechutz loyalfinon, and we saw the whole price of a karava and aktara. Zok Rav Ashi, don't bring me nisuch to aktara. Zok Rav Ashi be'etzem, I could learn out like a bio was saying. And Rava, you don't have a taina. Rav Ashi, I'm a nisuch ma'aktara. Lo yalfi rabbanan. So Vada Zok Rav Ashi, I want to go like a bio said earlier. That aktara, what is the halacha? The aktara of b'fnim b'chutz is the machlokes. And we tackle learn out pnim b'chutz. You're going to tell us chutz b'chutz lo yalfi rabbanan. What is Dr. Vashi? Nisam Aktara lo yalfi rabbanan. Afagav the chutz b'chutz lo yalfi, but Aktara from Aktara yalfi afagav the chutz b'fnim. You can't compare the two. Zok the Hela Gemara v'kulon shechasru. We discuss v'kulon shechasru. The Mishnah tells us koshu v'kriv b'chutz. You're potter. So again, if you missed anything and you're makkah b'chutz, you're potter. And on the way to understand you be potter would mean that if you didn't make some mikdash, it's possible. That's the two-way street. Zok the Gemara yibaylu chisaron the chutz mechisaron. Dainu, it left, when it left the base of English, it was good. Where did it become chaser? For whatever reason, either a piece got lost, or zavat, something happened that it's chaser now. But the chaser happened b'chutz. Zok demar, mi amrina kiven the nafak. If Sulei, lamaisa left. So it's possible, mali chaser, mali yaser, or doma lamaisa, yaitze, the isa be'ina in, the less be'ina night. It needs to be that right now, it needs to be be'etzem, even though it's a yaitze, it needs to be full. What do you see from there? Achi Yaakov is kulon. Then it needs to be complete. What is the whole shiloh? We're not going to Shitas Rebbe Elazar. We know Shitas Rebbe Elazar. He's either way problematic. We can't even have a havamina by him. The only shiloh is the Shitas Chachamim. Amalei befir shmil min the Rav. The akal pliger abanon. Allah Rebbe Elazar. Ella the what the isa bein of a chasarin. Moidule. Lav, isn't this a scenario the chazam? Chutz, more right away, is this? No, the chazam b'fnim. We have a very similar kash, and the says the same tchiyah. Tashma v'kulun shechazam v'krim b'chutz pater lav, the chazam b'chutz. No. Loi, the chazar b'fnim. Hamakriv kachim, we said ve'emurim. The halach is yechayiv for the emurim. Rashi says chayiv mishum the emurim. Look tomorrow. Why am I chayiv for the emurim? Now we're going to Shitas Reb Yosi. You Shitas Reb Yosi, we're understanding Rashi is explaining how many is Shitas Reb Yosi. And Rabbi Yossi holds it needs to be on the Mizbech. And the Pesukim tell us when we're burning something in the Mizbech, it needs to be ala eitzim asher ala eish. So we're understanding it needs to be mamish touching the Mizbech. In fact, tomorrow. Why is it chayiv amay veike chatzitza? So Shmuel says balbatish, you flipped it, so there's no chatzitza. I'm a Shmuel kashavchan. Rabbi Yechon am afilu temer shalei afachan v'man yisab shemini dam afilu elo asela yechayiv. Even on a sela yechayiv. So Avada doesn't mean it's migdash again, like we said. That the machlekes of Rabbi Yossi is dafka. That what dafka on the mizbech. Rav wants to say, Amar, we saw this type of concept min b'minoi. We saw this by the Daman of Pesach Shitas of Yehuda. Rav Amar min b'minoi einoi chaitzis. Zok the Heilige Mishnah. Mincha shaloi nikbetza ve'kriva b'chutz. What is the halacha? When a person has a mincha, but he didn't do the kmitza, ve'kriva b'chutz potter. B'kimtza, v'chazar, b'kumtza. And went back. L'seicha ve'kriva b'chutz. Very fascinating. Such a case, the halacha is Yerchai. Zok the Marav Amai. Why is the halacha when it went back? We're going to the last case in the Mishnah, where you did a kmitza and it bounced back. L'char should be batal. V'amai. The batal shirayim l'kaimitz. Why don't you have a problem with the b'roiv? So I'm saying, Nemak Torah b'kaimitz, v'nemak Torah b'shirayim. And Mak Torah, Rashi's mazah, we all know about that Torah. Kaimitz aim avatul chaver, because Rashi says we find this in the Torah meferish, where it says the kain took dama par and he took the dama sawyer, and we all know that Rashi had Davi Yadua that the dama par is merumu dama sawyer. One of bitul elamai in kaimitz mevatul kaimitz. So therefore, what Mak Torah's kaimitz and kaimitz avatul chaveroi. So too, after Shirayim, we're making a Xer Shavah, this concept in Shirayim, Mivatlan Kaimitz. Next Mishnah, HaKaimitz Balavayna, She'ekriv Echad Memachutz. The halacha is Chayiv. Rabbi Elazar Paiter, no, Achi Yaakov Shein, he needs to go together. Echad B'fnim, V'echad B'chutz Chayiv, Shnei B'zichel Lavayna, She'ekriv Echad Memachutz Chayiv. Rabbi Elazar Paiter, again, Achi Yaakov Shein, Echad B'fnim, V'echad B'chutz, the halacha is Chayiv. Zok Nemar Mina, Boy Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. Kaimitz mao shiyat kenegdoi b'shirai. What is the halacha when you have? We're going dafka. Dr. Yitzchak as follows. A person was what? Kaimitz mao shiyat kenegdoi b'shirai. A person was marked the dafka just the kaimitz. Just the kaimitz. And the point of his cheshbon is, let me get halfway. I don't need full, but let me get halfway. And we're going to Yesh Breira, Avad the Rashi's Mazbah, we're going to the Mandam Yesh Breira. So what is the halacha? Do we say Mishra Shari the Palga Lagamre? Avad the only Havamin is on half. Kalushe Miklash, Avad would help. Maybe that's going to be the Chiv Karetz, Chatas, whatever. But overall, it's not even on half going to be Kashin up a Kalushe Miklash, Shazak the Marma, leave them out. Either leave them Medam and Fag Mechetzi Mater, Mishra Shari. Manavshach, it should be mutter. It should be mutter. Why? Because it's going, it's a machlekes. If the halacha is if you can do Pigol on half. So according to Rameir says you could do Pigol on half. This is the Mishnah Menachos, Mefalkins, Mishnah Menachos to bring down Mishnah and Tezayin and Alpha there. There's a machlekes Rameir Chachamim where a person had Pigol only on the straight as the kaimitz of the mincha, but not the levayna. The Rameir holds it becomes a Pigol. Chacham says, "Ain't not a Pigol." So the according to Rameir, when the stand becomes Pigol, hey, Mefalk Lechatzimater, Dam Mefalk Lechatzimater, Mishra Shari. And he leave the Abanon, Dami Mefag Mechatzimater, Loi Mishra Shari, Loi Miklosh Kolish, Ela leave there Belazar. You go in the water, leave it there Belazar. So the Mar Belazar, Karbanas Relay, Dam Mefag Mechatzimater. Ela, who is this like? A Liba the Abanon. The Shailas over here, you're Abanon over here, you Mechayiv, even when a scenario where it's one of them. Ela Ma, you see from Aktorah Bifnim. Over here we have a Shaila. Does it help? Legamre, Lemishri, Oy Lekalushe. And that we're going to blind with a take. Hazoyrik, we're talking about a person that only one matana. And we're talking about even the chatas of Pnimius, so Rashi. That what all matanesein are ma'akiv. So Hazoyrik mixes down b'chutz, chayiv. Rabbi Elazar Omer, af amenasech, one kufyud omid beis in the top, af amenasech me'achag b'chag b'chutz, chayiv. Nechemia Omer, sheyore adam shekrivim b'chutz, what is the halacha? Chayiv. The reason is like Rashi, the kazavar, Shirayim and Ma'akvin, therefore it's considered a regular full. Zrika and you be chayiv. Amar Rava, Umayda Belazar, Bidom. That what? Even Machat is a Pnimius. That the halacha is, in such a case, he wants to say you'll be chayiv. The Tanya Belazar, B'Shem and Aimrim, Me'makam Shepasak, Hu Maskal. What do we see from there? The concept of Makam Shepasak, Maskal. The point is, where a person, for example, was doing this Rikas, and then it got lost, had a heart attack, died, whatever it is, the point is you had to get a new one. And where do you continue? You continue from the third Zrika, for example. You don't start over. What do you see from there? Elamai calls Zrika Rabbi Lazar Af hamenasech mei hachag bechag bechutz. Amar Rabbi Yechon Mishum Menachem Yevda. Rabbi Lazar is b'shita Sabakiva Rabba Amar. Da Amar Nisach Hamayim is daraisa. How do we know this? The Tanya Rabbi Kiva Aimer Unisacheha. This is talking about on Sukkot on the 6th day. Says Unisacheha. What's Nisacheha? The plural. B'shnei nisuchim akasav daber. Echad nisach hamayim ve'echad nisach hayayim. Amar leish lakish. So what do we see from there? We clearly see that what? This concept, the nisach hamayim is the raisa. Amar leish lakish Rabbi Yechon imala alon. He had a bunch of questions. You're telling me that this is the right, that's the raisa. Amar leish lakish Rabbi Yechon imala alon. But the nisach needs to be shleishis lugin. So to over here it should be afkan shleishis lugin. V'arbelazah me'achag kamar. Me'achag sounds like the what? Because again, Rashi's masber. Because there's a man the Amar holds in that from Ches and Sukkah, even with the look, not shleishus lugin. Me'achag kamar, and he should have said explicitly gimel lugin. Imala alam shari masashana. So to afkan shari masashana. V'arbelazah davka says b'chag kamar. So the Gemara Ishtamite say, Hadam Ravasi Re'Yechanim Shem Nechunya Ish Bekas Beis Chorson. That what? That avad it's the raisa, but not from the sukkah that we think on the sechel. Rather, it's the halach l'mishim sinai. Why? Because the es and the tiyas, the halach it's mutter lamin yoim before shvuas, and arava. The shaila how they did that rabbis. V'nisach hamayim. The point is, it clearly says over here, nisach hamayim. What is the point? It's halacha l'mishim sinai. Torah abon haminasech. What is the halacha when a person does nisach shloshis lugin mayim bechag bechutz chayv? If a person did what? If he did it l'shem chag chayv. So tomorrow, what's the difference if he filled l'shem chag or menasich shloishis lugim mayim bechag? What is the nafkamina? May benayu Omer Menachem Rabbi Yitzchak beyesh shir b'mayim kemiflagi. What is this? Machlokes yesh shir k'mayim. On that zok tanakam that a person is menasich shloishis lugin yain. The halacha is yichayim. What would be the halacha if you did 5 lugamayim? Zok chachamim b'chlam ha'shaymana. Ma'adach you do gimel lugamayim yichayv kol shekain v'kol shekain yichayv 5. Even though what? Even though you filled it up with a kli gadol. Why? It's not a problem. That the shear is not a problem. It's not dafka gimel. Comes Rabbi Lazar says v'hu shemilon l'shem chag. It has to be spitz the shear. What is that? Gimel luga, nothing more. Therefore, what would be the halacha if you filled up, let's say, 5 lugan? There it's not going to work. It's not going to be kodesh because that's not the shear. More than that, the shear has to be specific. The ain klisharis dafka mekadesh unless it's right, and more than gimel lugin is not right. So that would be enough kamina. Rav Papa Amar, one at the top of the final daf of Kuf Yud Aleph Amar Aleph bekarvoi nisachim b'midbar pligi. So Rashi's marich this whole sugya, this machlekes is really totally habahan other machlekesim. So let's explain a little. We're not going to go too much into this. But to explain a little, what does it mean? Bekarvin nisachim b'midbar k'miflagi. The pasuk clearly tells us that b'nisachim, when a person came to Eretz Yisrael, when we came to Eretz Yisrael, we clearly had to do nisachim with the kabbanos. Now the question is, okay, that's the pasuk. The question becomes, was there nisachim in the midbar or not? Now, if you're telling me that there was nisachim in the midbar, it comes out that the pasuk is not coming to tell us anything new, really. We already had nisachim in midbar. Comes to tell us the pasuk what? B'bias haaretz. There was also nisachim. What's the pasuk telling us really? Elamai. It's coming. The pasuk is coming to tell us by bama yachid, that's the whole point. We're talking about the biyamas yachid that became mutter. So the pasuk not coming to stand b'bias haaretz. Rather, the pasuk is coming to tell us by what? By a bama yachid. Now that it became mutter b'bias haaretz. However, biyamas yachid, everyone agrees. This is not a shaila that there was no keli. There was no keli with it. Memela zaktamar yechayev and scenario will come out. You bechayev what? You bechayev a nisuch bechutz even when there's no klisharis. However, but if you held there's no nisachim midbar, and therefore what comes the pasuk to tell us bias aretz? It's not going to. The pasuk is not coming to tell us bama yachid. The only reason why you're telling us that the pasuk is talking about bama yachid because you already had nisach in the midbar. What else is the pasuk coming to tell us? However, if you hold there was no nisachim in the midbar. Elamai, the pasuk is coming to tell us right now. The pasuk is talking about not a bama yachid, rather a regular bama gdaila. There by bama gdaila, what was the halacha? The nisach was with the kli. So it comes out if you do it b'chutz without a kli, you're pater. So again, that's on a simple level. What it means? Bekarvin nisachim b'midbar pli. That Rashi's masbir is barichus, that he wants to tell us this will be the machlekes of bama yachid or not. If you hold there was nisachim in the midbar, the pasuk has to come to tell us bama yachid. Bama yachid didn't have a keli. If it didn't have a keli, you chayv him b'chutz without a keli. But if you hold there was nisachim in the midbar, the pasuk is not coming from bama yachid. Rather, it's coming from the Bam Agdala. The Bam Agdala did have a kli, and therefore you would be potter if you did it without a kli. Ravina Amar, according to Ravina, we're coming to tell us, Bein Rebbe Lazar, Bein Tanakama, no. Avada, there was nisach b'midbar. And if there's nisach b'midbar, there's no kli. So what's it mean? And therefore, you be chayiv like kli. So what would be the shaila? Zok the Mar's fault. The shaila is benisach mayim. Benisach yayin, there's no question. I agree, you chayiv without a kli. The question becomes, by benisach mayim, since you look at it, that what? By nisach mayim was only betzibur. And nisach mayim betzibur had a kli agav. So do you look at Nisach Yayin? Nisach Yayin didn't have a kli, therefore Avadim Nisach Mayim Akalona for Nisach Yayin therefore I'm potter, or maybe I'm chayiv because it had a kli, or not. Do we look at it or not? And that we're saying is like Nisach Mayim Pligis the Machlokes. Everyone holds Avadim Rashi. This is all Rashi. Rashi's bas with this. That everyone agrees to do Sachem B'Midbar. The only shaila is if you can learn Nisach Mayim Chayr was B'Tzibur, and there it had the kli. Tana Hamenasech shloisha lugen yain b'chutz chayv. Rav B'Shem Omer who shekotchem b'kli has to be the mekadosh b'kli. Zoktamar my benai. What is the nafkamina? My benai more than Rav Rashi. My pligi. What is the machlekes? So Amar of Adabar Yitzchak the machlekes will be berutzei midas ika benai. Rutzei midas means what happens when you overflow. Mamash like Avdallah, so it's overflow. And Avadim we all agree the unique kedusha is a kli. The question is Zok Rabbanan I hold by rutzei midas it is niskadish. However, Zokter Belazar, it's not a Scottish. Why? Because it needs to be in the Kli. Again, this is really Machlekes. Rashi brings down. So Machlekes and Menachas Veiches. Rav Yehuda Amar Karvu Nisachim Bebama Iku Benayu. The Tanakama holds you don't need a Kli. However, the Machlekes is like we saw earlier on the top of the Amid. If there was Nisachim in the Nisachim in the Bemidbar not. Nisachim in Bama is real Machlekes Tolim Bemidbar not. Iku Benayu. Uber looked at Hani Tanoi the Tanya. Bamas Yachid in its Riknisachim. David Rabbi v'Chamayim Returnisachim. The Ani Tanoit's real ocean another machlekes Kani Tanoit. The Tani Kisavoy Latino when it says in the pasuk when it talks about Abnei Salvam Atalem it's a pasuk with Midbar. It says Kisavoy Eretz Moshe V'Seichen. Kisavoy. What's the pasuk telling us? Latino Sachim B'Magdayla Kasem Adaber. Zok the Mar Atayim B'Magdayla Ina Fila B'Magdana Kushoayim when it says the pasuk El Eretz Moshe V'Seichen. And here we're quoting from the end of the pasuk. It says Ashani Noisin Lechem. What's Lechem telling us? What's that? Who is the Shita? The Rebbe Shmuel. Rebbe Kiva Aimeno. Kisavayu, when it says in the pasuk Kisavayu, Latin and the Sachab Bamaktana Kasabadaber. Ataimer, the Bamaktana, the Bamakdail, Kishoim, when it says in the pasuk, that's what Shav Seichem. Hare, Bama Nahagas, which is a Bama Yachid, Bechama Shavas Kasabadaber. Keshet to Laimar. Now, what is the Machlekes? Taka, the underlying Machlekes is Ladei Rebbe Shmuel, Loi, Karvan Sacham Midbar. Ladei Kiva, Karvan Sacham Midbar, very Gishmak. We're showing us a brayso that the Machlekes is Taka, Tali Habaha, if they're Makriv in Bamidbar or not. Rabbi Nechemia Omer Shiyara Adam Shekrivim B'chutz the Aloch Ezichayv. Rabbi Yochanan Tana Rabbi Nechemia Kedivra Omer Shirayim Ma'akvim. We're going L'man Dama Shirayim Ma'akvim and therefore Yichayv. Meisvei Rabbi Nechemia Omer Shiyara Adam Shekrivim B'chutz Chayv and Amalei Rekiva Lo Shirayim Adam Shiyara Mitzvah. And Amalei he answered him what? Amalei no Varim the lambs with Varim the fags Chichush. Why change Shiyara Mitzvah B'Mekim B'chutz Chayv? So on that Rabbi Kiva tells him Nechemia Amalei Lo Ma'at Varim V'Reidim Shen Tchilas Avodah. Now the question over here is, and if you're going to tell me that he argues, it's a bam raya, it's a tiyufta. In Kitanya here, what taka be easy out is b'shirayim hachitzayim. Over here, Rashi is not geras this malach. This whole parentheses. If you look in Rashi, rather, if you look inside Rashi, the way you read it is, the gersa of Rashi is, they bring down over here in the goyes, Ella, rather the answer is, Ella lidvarav de Rekiva ka'amar Avadi is going, I hold, Zogt, Reb Nechemia, I hold Avad the Shiraim are ma'akvin, but according to you, you should agree that the Shiyarim mitzvah. Hamaylik. What is the halacha? Hamaylik is ha'oif b'fnim v'hel b'chutz. So you did the malika. Very simple. You did the malika inside. V'hel b'chutz. What is the halacha? Chayv. What happens? You did malika b'chutz. So we all know malika is only by the Beis Hamikdash. Malak b'chutz v'hel b'chutz potter. Ha'sheichet is ha'oif b'fnim. What does the halacha do? Shchita doesn't usually work. V'hel b'chutz potter because shchita in Beis Hamikdash is worthless. Shachat b'chutz, ve'ela b'chutz. We're on the topic of Alf Amud Beis. Makes sense? B'chutz b'chayiv. Nimtza. It comes out, very fascinating, that the derech, which is the malika, the derech hechsherah. Hechsherah, right away, the Gemara is going to say, you read it, the chiyuvai. The malika is really causing the chiyuv. Bifnim, because that's the malika inside. P'turai, b'chutz, derech hechsherah b'chutz, p'tur b'fnim. So again, if you do a malika inside, which is the chiyuvai, makes it, then I'm potter outside when I do malika outside. The opposite way. If I do a shchita inside, avada, I'm chayv outside. Shimon Aimer calls shechayaven olav b'chutz, chayaven al kol yotzei b'bifnim. He says, if you chayv b'chutz, you chayv inside. So it sounds like Kipshuta, which you're going to see in the Gemara, that if you did, for example, a shchita outside, you'd be chayv inside maybe. Kol chayetz b'fnim shala b'chutz, chutz, however, min ha-sheichet. He says, but if you do a shchita b'fnim, shala b'chutz, you're not chayv in such a case. Zok Gemara right away. Hayachsher chiyuvayu. Hayachsher chiyuvayu. What are you reading as a hechsher? You got to read that's the one that's causing the chiyuv. In a chanam is more easy out. Tni chiyuvayu. So what do we say? Reb Shimon Aimer kol shechayavin olav b'chutz. Sounds like whatever you chayav outside, I'm chayavin inside. Ahechakai. What case is he going on? Ile my reisha koin the malika, the what? Hamaylik oif bifnim. What is the halach of someone that's malika inside? Ve'el b'chutz chayiv. However, malak b'chutz. But if you did the malika outside, ve'el b'chutz b'chutz potter. On that, Reb Shimon says, "Ma'amal Reb Shimon kiheicha." Just like you understand malika b'fnim, iya mechayiv. So to b'chutz nai mechayiv. So tomorrow, if so, hi, kol shechayav b'chutz, kol shechayav b'fnim b'voyli. So can't be Reb Shimon going in the case of malika. Ella, the case of malika b'chutz, ella kiheicha the b'chutz la mechayiv. So too can be b'chayiv malika b'fnim. That can be b'fnim nam l'chayiv. Ha kol shein chayav l'b'chutz b'voyli. Kol shein chayav b'chutz b'voyli. So what's the case of kol shechayav and olav? Ela seifa koi. Rather it's going to the seifa. You rather the Talmud is going to the seifa what? Ha sheich elay b'fnim ela b'chutz potter. Someone did a shchita inside. He's potter b'shachat b'chutz ela b'chutz chayiv, and that's v'amal Shimon ki heicha the b'fnim la mechayiv. Just like when you do a shchita inside now mechayiv b'chutz ela mechayiv. If so, ha kol shein chayav b'voyli. Ella, you're going to go on the case of shchita b'chutz, keicha b'chutz mechayiv, b'fnim na mechayiv. Haktani, clearly says explicitly in the Mishnah otherwise. Haktani chutz min hashek b'fnim al b'chutz. So what is the case? On that, Zok Gemara, Zir is going to be mefarish as follows. Ziri, shchitas behim b'layli kibenayu. The machlekes between Reb Shimon is as follows. V'achi kama. What is the halacha v'chein hashaycha behim b'fnim b'layla? V'hel b'chutz potter. The halacha is them also teira, therefore you'll be potter. And therefore what? On that, shachat b'chutz b'layla, v'hel b'chutz chayiv. However, Zok Reb Shimon, no. Shimon ayim kol shechayavin al b'chutz chayavin. So takol kayetz b'fnim v'hel b'chutz, except chutz min hashechet b'chutz b'fnim, chutz min hashechet b'fnim v'hel b'chutz. And that Rava, that sheet is here. Rava wants to say the machlekes Reb Shimon and Reb Shimon is as follows. Rava ama kabbalah b'kli chol yika b'nai. V'hachi kama. This is how you read it. V'chein makabel b'kli chol b'fnim v'hel b'chutz yipater. However, makabel b'kli chol b'chutz v'hel b'chutz yichayv. And Reb Shimon ayim no kol shechayavin b'chutz chayavin and kol kayetziboy b'fnim. The halacha would be also teir v'hel b'chutz. Chutz, when a sheikh and I b'fnim v'hel b'chutz. Zok the Gemara v'hashted Tani avu the Shmuel Rav Yitzchak that a moilek oif b'fnim. What are the halacha if a person does malik inside v'hel b'chutz chayiv? So too moilek b'chutz v'hel b'chutz potter. Reb Shimon chayiv. Reb Shimon will come out you mechayiv. Reb Shimon Zok the Gemara Reb Shimon hasn't chayiv Tani. You read it. Kol shechayav and Allah b'fnim. You take read it. The scenario is like malika. Kol shechayav and b'fnim. The hell b'chutz, you'll be taka chayavin. Why chayavin b'chutz? The ma'aseh because you made a malika outside. I'm going to pick up from the Mishnah.